Shift overlap. Right, okay, so we've almost sort of started a little bit early there. We've gone over kind of what your experience is and the levels you're at the moment. So, Kathy, I know you've got a couple of questions you mentioned there. Do you want to tell me what they are just now? Is there any expectation that you have?
Yeah. Oh God, what's the name of the tool? The Band-Aid tool.
Okay.
So I have a Mac, and so Macs come with their version of Photos.
Yeah.
And so its own photo editing program. And so if I just want to remove like, a little black dot or a piece of dirt or whatever, it's super easy on the Mac program because it's just a circle and you dot it and whatever.
Yeah.
But in Lightroom, when you do that, it creates this little, all these circles and arrows.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I'll hit it, and then all of a sudden it puts an eyeball I totally don't get what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I know exactly what you mean. Okay, right, that's fine. So I will definitely cover that off. Okay.
Okay. I don't know.
Right. What else have you got there?
That was all I wrote down right now. I'll have to think of what else I was thinking of. That was the main one, that tool messes me up.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. Valerie, anything for yourself, anything in particular that you're looking to get out of the session here?
No, just I want to be able to use it. I did send a picture to you. It was just very last minute. Okay.
Yeah, I've got that.
It was just because we were in Colorado, the light was behind us and I wasn't paying any attention to it. So, something about how to fix that to make it viewable.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I've not actually seen it yet because it's come through as a raw file. I don't get a preview, so I've got it sat ready to put into Lightroom. So that'll be the first time I see it. So it'll be interesting. Hi, Tanya, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, glad you could join us. I know you've sent a couple of photos across as well, so we'll try and make sure I get to at least one of the couple that you sent across.
Yeah, don't worry too much about them.
No, we'll definitely cover something. We're quite a small group tonight, so that's absolutely fine. So I've just said should have plenty of time just to get through things and ask a few questions and stuff. Okay. Anything particular for yourself, Tanya? Is there anything specific you want to pick up from tonight?
Me. I don't use Lightroom. I think, as you said, they're all pretty much the same. So, I'm teaching myself. I just want, I'll just anything I can pick up, really.
Okay, that's fair enough. Right,
Andy, I did think of my other question.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
So when I'm reading comments and stuff in the on the Facebook pages of people, and people will say things like, if I were you, I would lighten up just the shadow on the one side of their face, or if it's a landscape, they'll say, I would lighten up the part where the mountain is. I don't know how to, I only know how to do the exposure, which does the whole photo.
Yeah, we'll definitely cover that as well.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So let's get started. So you're probably glad to hear there's no slides for this. Okay. There's no presentation. There's no PowerPoint involved in this. This is all directly in Lightroom. Okay. So I want to make it as practical as possible. So what I will do, just share my screen here a second.
I'm very sorry, but I'm still eating my dinner. Excuse me, everyone. So sorry.
Fine. No problem at all. Still get a little crossover sometimes between the different screens, but I think this should be okay. Sometimes it switches around all by itself seemingly. Right, so what you should see there is a very simple folder directory. Okay, so I'll be using 4 different folders throughout this session. Got folder 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I'm going to do is run through a full flow as it would happen kind of real world. Okay, so in folder 1, we're going to pretend that that is the camera or the memory card. That's where the photos currently exist. Okay, and I can just open this up here. I've got some photos in there. I've got a couple of stock images that I'll use for specific purposes. And Tanya and Valerie have got the images that you've sent over there as well. Okay, so Valerie, sorry, that one that isn't displaying, that's your one. Okay.
Right.
So that's what I mean. I haven't seen it at all yet.
That.
And then as we go through, the other folders will become relevant. Okay. So let's get to the start of the show. I'm just going to switch this sharing here because I'll need to keep I'm going to the wrong screen. So there we go. Right, okay, so should be seeing Lightroom in front of you now, yeah? Is it coming through okay? Yeah, excellent, okay.
Yeah.
So as we're going through here, guys, just fire me a question, just give me a shout, okay, just interrupt me, absolutely fine. It's a small enough session to get away with that. I'm not going to mute everyone, just because it is quite a small group, that's fine. So when you first open Lightroom, this is pretty much what you're going to see, okay? If you have any images already in, they'll just be sat there. And immediately you are confronted with all these menus, bars, buttons, colors, twists and dials and knobs and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. Okay, so we'll take it step by step and we'll just run through them. Okay, so for example here, I've just opened it. This is a few images I've selected. So these are just here ready to go. Okay, they would be images I already have in Lightroom. So the first thing we need to do anything at all with the photos is import them into Lightroom. Okay. We do this on the bottom left down here. And it literally just says import. And all this simply means is that I'm going to bring in a version of the image into the Lightroom catalog. Okay. And that's a great start. You know, that's fine. I moved a folder earlier because my computer's run out of space, so that's okay. So if we take this just a little, break it down window by window. On the left, you've got the source, okay? And that is basically asking, where are your photos just now? In the middle, you've got what you're going to do with them. And in the right, you've got where you're going to put them, okay? What's happening with them now? So let's start from the source. So where we say, where are my photos just now? So like I say, guys, this would be your camera or your memory card, depending on how you work it. And as I said, mine are in folder 1. Okay, so I'm just navigating to where they are. Normally, if it's the camera, you just see it there. So I've got my C drive, which is my built-in one, and my D drive, which was an external. You just have your camera or memory card shown there as well. Okay, so nice and straightforward so far. Now, I'm going to start throwing in some tips pretty much straight out. There's a little tick box here for including subfolders. So if I have images across all 4 of these different folders, I can come to this top one, which is called Edit and Crash Course. And if I tick the include subfolders, any images in any of those 4 folders will be displayed. If I only want to see one, I just click into that one folder, okay? Or untick that box, absolutely fine. What that'll do, Lightroom will then just find any image files that it picks up. And it'll say, right, these are the images that I found. This is JPEGs and RAWs. And it says, right, which ones do you want to carry across? And this part, fairly self-explanatory. If you don't want them, untick them. Okay, nice and simple. If you have a whole bunch of photos in here, a couple of quick shortcuts. If I click one, I hold in Control, which will be Command on a Mac, and I click whichever other ones I want. I want those 3. I'm only selecting those 3. I can then just untick the 3 together, or vice versa. Okay. And you've got things down here like uncheck them all, check them all, and you can got a couple of different views. You've got your grid, and you have your loop, and that is just basically seeing one at a time. Personally, at this stage, all I want to do is get the images onto my computer, so don't really worry about this kind of stuff at all. If you're using a memory card and you've maybe already brought across, say, 50 of the images, but you haven't cleared that memory card and you've taken another 100, then it will have the 100 ticked, and it will pretty much automatically know that you've already brought in the other 50, so they'll already be unticked. Okay. So I'm going to want to bring these all over. What I've got here now in this middle section is a couple of options. I've got a copy as a DNG, okay, or as a lot of people pronounce it, it's just a DING file, DNG file. And all that is a digital negative graphic. Don't worry about the exact acronym. It's a different version of RAW. So each camera has its own version. So I shoot Nikon, and that is an NEF file. Valerie, I assume you shoot Canon. Well, you've told me you shoot Canon, but I noticed it's a CR3 file. Okay, so that is Canon's version of RAW, and Sony and Fuji and all the other brands have their own version of a RAW file. DNG is a generic RAW. So it just means it takes away the CR3 or the NEF or the whatever other extension is, it makes a sort of generic RAW version, okay? So you can do that if you like. You've got a straight over copy. So it'll leave the originals on the memory card as it is and copy the files across. You have move. Again, hopefully fairly self-explanatory so far. It will take the originals off the memory card and move them across. And then you've got add, which means the original files will not move at all. It'll just add the images to Lightroom. Okay. What that does mean is if your images are on the memory card, then that's the only place they are. So personally, this is my preference. I always use copy. Okay, it's a straight up copy. I don't need to change the file type. I'm happy with my Nikon RAW version. That's okay. And I don't move them. The reason I use copy is that when I'm transferring, might only be 50 or it could be 1,000 photos from a camera onto the computer. If I'm doing a move and something goes wrong, I'm taking those originals off that camera. If for whatever reason anything breaks, anything happens, the wire gets pulled halfway through, anything like that at all, then those files are at risk. Whereas if I copy them, even if everything crashes halfway through, the originals remain untouched. Okay, so I personally just do a copy.
So the originals are staying on your memory card.
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically a copy and paste, essentially.
Okay.
Originals don't go anywhere. So that's my personal preference. If you have absolutely loads, you can use a little slider down the bottom corner here just to change the size of the thumbnails. So if you want to see loads of them on screen, just go through them a bit quicker. Or if you want to look at them a little bit closer, you can make them a bit bigger. Okay. And you've got a few options here into how to look at them in different ways. It would be capture name, capture time, A to Z, file type, for example, is helpful if you've got photos and videos and you only want the photos across. Then file type is a quick, easy way just to filter them out a little bit without having to go through all the file names one by one. So a few different options in there. And then you've got the right-hand side. So I now know where my images are, and I know what I'm going to do with them, and I'm going to say what I need to actually do with them. So as in where they're going to go and how they're going to do it. This is the first one is the build previews. So Lightroom doesn't amend the photos themselves in any way, shape, or form. Okay, what Lightroom basically does is takes like a cover version of the photo, and that's what you edit. So the original file is never getting touched. It's just this representation that you're adjusting. Okay. And I know that's a little bit tricky to get your head around to start off with. It will become easier as the more you do it. So what you're basically doing is telling Lightroom how you want it to build this preview, this cover version. And again, there's a few different options. So you've got minimal, which again is fairly self-explanatory. It will take across all the basic information. It will keep it as small as possible in terms of file size and so on. And that's fine if you want a quick transfer from the camera or the card into the computer. However, as you're going through them, it might take a little bit longer for it to build up the full page as you're looking in and zooming in and things like that. You've got the embedded and sidecar, which is not self-explanatory in any way, shape, or form. But that is essentially will take your inbuilt camera preview, if it's done one. So if you're shooting RAW, the camera essentially always makes like a little JPEG version of it anyway, built into the data of the image. And that's what you bring across. Standard is pretty much just as it is. It's a fine balance between the file size that you are copying across the information and how quickly it can render everything and zoom in and things like that as you're processing them. And then you've got 1:1, which means it's absolutely full size. So my Nikon is 24 megapixels And I know some of the cameras now are, I think, over like 60 and 80 megapixels. So the file sizes are massive. So if you're doing one-to-one, you will get massive copies across. Okay. Doesn't make a huge difference which one you want to go for. It really just depends on your personal preference of ways of working. There's no right or wrong. Personally, I use minimal. It's just what I've always used, and it's done me fine. Okay. You've then got an option here for building smart previews. Now, what a smart preview is it will make a compressed version of the image that you're moving across, and you'll also have it web-based as well. So it will sync to kind of Adobe Cloud, and what it will mean was that even if your photos are, if you've done it on your computer and then you bring up Lightroom on your phone, you should still be able to see the two connected because you've used this smart preview. Okay. I always edit on my computer, so it's not something I used, so I leave it unticked. Don't import suspected duplicates. So this is what I mentioned there, where if you've already got those first 50 from the card that have already been imported, leaving that ticked will just say, I know you've already got those. Recommend it, otherwise you end up with duplicates of those first 50 again. And if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with 4 or 5 different copies of the same photos again and again and again. Make a second copy too. This is really handy, particularly if the photos are very important. If you've just been out for a walk and snapped a couple of flowers or whatever, and it's nothing specific that you've gone out for, it's optional. If they are client images, okay, whether it be a wedding or a portrait or an event or whatever, this is a really handy option. So basically it goes through the exact same process, but when you copy the image, it's going to make 2 versions of it and put them into 2 different places. Okay, so all I would do is tick that, and again I would tell it where I wanted it to put it. So I've got like a backup folder there. If you want to be really image conscious, you'd have an external hard drive, and the second copy would go to the external hard drive. Now, when I shot any weddings or any client work at all, that's what I would do. So the images would go onto the computer for me to work on, and the backup would go onto the hard drive. So if at any time my computer crashed, if there was a horrendous virus or any of that kind of stuff, I've got everything saved on the hard drive, so they are not lost. Because the memory card itself, it's generally recommended that you just format that memory card regularly. Some people will say every time you use it, which is fine, but it means obviously the images aren't on the camera or the memory card anymore. So you should always have your images in 2 places, and whether that's your computer and the cloud or a computer and a hard drive, whatever way you want to do it. Because if one of them wipes out, then they're gone completely. So having 2 different copies on your computer is a start, but if your computer goes down and you've lost them, then that's the whole computer gone. You've lost both versions, which is why it's good to keep them separate. So there's that option there anyway. Collections I'll come back to later, okay, because that gets a little bit more in depth. Renaming, quite straightforward. So you have these templates, and it's just asking what kind of format you want to put the naming into.
I can't actually see if are you clicking on things?
I am indeed, yes.
I can't see any of this.
Are you not seeing it?
No.
I
did. Something came up a second ago, but not not these folders and you're talking about. No, I'm not. They're behind the photo. They're the people.
Mine are too. Yeah.
You can minimize the people.
Yeah. Oh, that's on your screen. Sorry, I've moved the people out of my screen. So right at the very top of all the people, you've got like a mini bar, a medium bar, and a full size bar. Beside them, if you just move that around your window, that'll get them out of the way.
Yeah.
My thumbnail video. The mini bar.
Yeah, you can click the mini bar, that'll minimize it down.
Okay, right, here we go.
You got it there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that was a Zoom thing, so I thought the screen wasn't sharing properly for a minute. So you didn't miss much. I mean, I've talked through each of the...
Oh, no, I was listening, yeah.
I was going through, so that's okay. But no, good shout out there. Right, okay. Sorry. Renaming. So custom name is whatever you decide to name it, okay? Can be waterfalls, can be this client's name, whatever it happens to be. An X of Y just means 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10, and it'll just go through the sequence. And again, most of these are fairly self-explanatory. Original file number, the sequence, the custom name, the date, and the file name, and so on and so on. Okay, they're all fairly standard. The custom name is then the next field down. So if I want to give these a custom name, for example, again, personally, I like to go with custom name sequence, because it will then be whatever I name it, then just image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll go all the way up to, if I've got 1500, it'll go all the way up to 1500. So if I call these VPC crash course, for example, and it'll give me this little sample. So in this is going to be VPC crash course 1. Okay. If I want to change the start number for any reason, I can do. So again, if I'm doing this in from 2 different cameras, for example, and the first camera has been up to 99, I can just start that from 100. So I can start from wherever I like. And extension, just leave it as it is. That's just RAW, JPEG, CR3, NEF, whatever it happens to be. Okay. Moving on, we've got the apply during import. So I'm not going to go into the develop settings just now, okay, but just be aware that you can put them in. So literally as soon as you're moving these into Lightroom, you can make it do things if you like, okay? So you can put it, let's say, straight into black and white. So instantly, as it moves them across, it will put them into a black and white version if that's what you want to do. And it's just a range of them, which again, we'll move into the develop side once we're past this bit. Metadata. If you don't know, metadata is the information that you're putting into the photograph. Okay, so for example, you can have a preset. So again, I've got a VPC standard here, but if I just go to a new one, just to show you some of the information that comes up. So I would call this whatever I want to call this. Okay, it's just a preset name, it's a label. And it's going to ask me for very simple information through to some very complex information. So, right, copy name, just put my name, it's fine. If I want to label it and caption every image, I don't normally do this level because, again, I quite often do 500 or 1,000 at a time and try to do one by one. It's just too much information. Do I want user comments? Do I want the GPS information? If that was available on the camera, I could include that. Again, there's a whole range of stuff here. What I do tend to include, so IPTC, something like intellectual property, something. Okay, so this is your information. This is you putting your copyright details basically directly into the image. So copyright, again, is going to be Virtual Photo Club. I won't put this on, obviously, because some of these are your images. Copyright status, I can say copyrighted, which means it is mine. Nobody can use it without my permission. Or I can say public domain, which means anybody can help themselves. And if you've got usage terms and a website that has your copyright information, you can put this into it. And there's just all this information, guys, okay? The creator, your name, your address, your website, your job title, as much or as little information as you want to include, okay? It's not essential, especially if it's a hobby. What I have seen is on occasion where people's images have been stolen and there's been court cases and all this kind of stuff, they've been able to prove that the images were the original photographers based on this metadata. Okay, so it's entirely up to yourself if you want to start using that or not. It's not essential, especially if you're just playing around and getting used to things. This is an overcomplication if you don't want to get into that level, okay? So let me just come out of there. Keywords. Keywords, I absolutely recommend using keywords as soon as you possibly can because this is how you organize it, which is part of the massive power of what Lightroom can do, okay, and most other editing programs as well. So obviously we've got a bit of a mix here. So for example, I would say, right, my keywords are, these are Virtual Photo Club. I'm using these for a workshop. I'm using this for editing purposes. And bear in mind that this is going to apply to all of them. So although some of them are field and flowers and some are faces, I won't put that in just now because it will apply to everything. If I wanted, I could put in things like April, I could put 2021. I could put if they're outdoors, if they're studio, if they're portraits or weddings, I can put the client name in there. And these are basically all going to be searchable terms so that when my Lightroom ends up 10, 20, 50,000 images, I can search them really, really quickly. So I'll put in some keywords. Let's carry on. I'm then going to say where I want the files to go. Okay, so because I'm copying them, or if I'm moving them, the originals remaining untouched, but I will be making a copy of the files. So I'm now just basically telling it where on my computer I want them to go. Okay, so let's see. I did have this actually all preset, but it's reset itself, which is just rude. Is it this folder in here? And this is pretty much just like a Windows or Mac. It's just a file directory. And you just basically click to say, right, where's the folder I want to put these into? So I'm going to go into my VPC folder here and edit and crash course. And I would put them into folder 2. So if remember, folder 1 is like the camera or the memory card. Folder 2 is going to be my folder where I'm actually moving the images on the computer. Okay. If you've already got the folder set up, that's great. If you don't, you have a little tick box here for into subfolder. And if I click that, I would just call it, say, an import folder, for example. And you notice just on the side there, it creates that subfolder for me. So I don't have to go and set it all up or anything. I can just do that directly in the system itself. Okay. You can also decide either to put them all into one folder, or if you are moving them from different folders, or if you have got one folder with photos from a range of dates, you can select how it divides them up for you. Personally, I keep it into one folder. Nice and simple. I'll arrange it myself the way I want to after. So move them into folder 2. I've done everything. So I've said where the images are just now, which ones I want to include, what I want it to do with them, and I'm ready to click import down in the bottom corner there. And when I do that, that will take a little bit of time now, depending on obviously how many images you have, what size they are. No, disable that. That doesn't normally come up. We're going to ignore that just now. Okay, so there we go. So it's moved the images across. Okay. So what I'm looking at now is, although it looks the exact same here, this is now the Lightroom surface version, if you like, of these images. And what you might see is some of the images changing just slightly as they kind of tick across, particularly with the raw files. As I said, a lot of the raw images will have almost like a JPEG file embedded in the data. So sometimes, particularly if it's running a little bit slow, when you move your images across, it will look a bit prettier because it's being processed. It's that JPEG version. And then it will just kind of go to the flat version. That's the raw. That's the full raw. Okay. And I know, again, when I first started, that really confused me. I thought, that looks really good. I've got a great shot there. And then it just go really flat. I'm like, oh, what happened? What's going on? And it was just because of that. It was taking the preview and then it was doing the full process. And it was coming right, there's your raw image. Okay. So this is now my Lightroom version of the images. And this is in the library tab. So you see up at the top here, this is library. And again, all these windows, all these tabs, all these little colors and doohickeys and everything have all now changed because I'm no longer in the import window. So again, we'll just take this nice and slow, go around them all, okay? Start across here. So I've got library, and that is, as it says, this is my file management side of things. This is where I view the images. This is where I rename them and things like that if I need to, okay? Just within Lightroom. Develop is where we go into the editing side. We'll come to that shortly. We won't go into the rest of them, okay? This is not relevant for the basics. So you've got map, where you can geotag all your images. You can basically say, I took this up this mountain, and it'll create a little bit of a map for you. Book is if you're starting to create a photo album. Slideshow, again, if you're making a slideshow with the images. Print gives you a nice little layout as to the print sizes, and kind of helps you make sure that you're measuring it all up and aligning the sides. And web is for popping them onto an online gallery. They're a little bit more advanced, so we won't be coming into those ones just now, but the library and the develop will definitely be the main ones. Now, before we get into these parts, any questions on that import process? Nope. Go.
Has everyone else used Lightroom? Am I the only one who hasn't?
I haven't.
Okay.
Not just you.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So my Lightroom screen looks very different than this, and I have the version that you subscribe to monthly. So is that different than what you're using?
No, this is the monthly one as well.
Oh,
That's a good point, though. What I would guess you're using is there are two different versions of Lightroom. Okay, there's Lightroom CC, which is the cloud version, and there's Lightroom Classic. So this is the classic version.
so mine has just the LR like yours. So I don't know.
So let me just...
Would it look different if you're using a Mac versus a not Mac?
Possibly. I've never used a Mac pretty much in my life. No,
Maybe that's the difference. Because my little icon is the same as your icon. So anyway, okay, that's fine.
I have seen it. It looks fairly similar. It's maybe just Adobe Lightroom CC. I'm just going to show the cloud version as well, just so I've got sight of it, just to make sure it's not that. Because it should look fairly similar. Pretty much the same kind of version. Is that closer to what you're seeing, Kathy? This
What am I supposed to look at?
So this is the cloud version, which is different to the classic version.
Okay. Well, you can just carry on. Yeah. It's just my screen looks really different. So where you're choosing things to change.
All right. Okay.
So, okay.
I will definitely swing back to that one. I will even catch up
Okay.
separately if we need to for that one. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So what we have then is, I say this is the library view. I've still got all my same images, and I can click through them. Now, we'll start off with the organizing part. Okay. So again, down in this middle section here, down near the bottom, we've got a few different views that we can look at. We've got the grid, which is what is on just now. We've got loop, which again is just one by one. We have a compare view, which will just put two side by side. And we have the survey view, which we can put multiples. So if I selected, let's say, 5 of them, and just holding in control and selecting different ones, or again, command on a Mac, and I go to survey, it'll just put all them into the screen there for me. And I've also got a tagging option as well. Okay, so this is a people tagging. I've never used this. It's not something I'd like to do within Lightroom. But if you wanted to do it, only if this is needed, you can start doing that. Okay, and again, it is similar to Facebook, or I think Instagram. More familiar with Facebook, but basically you tag on a face and the name pops up. It is quite handy if you want to do it. It will try its best to recognize the faces. So again, if you've got 100 photos that you're putting in, and you've got the same person in 20 of them, it should be able to pick up 19 or 20 of those images and say, we think this is the same person. So it's quite handy that way. Okay. Now, we talked about the keywords as part of the import, and this is where we can add more specific individual ones. Okay. So the 2021, the April, the editing, so on, are all down there where I put them into. If I want to add in, say, something like trees, field, outdoors, whatever all else I want to put in there, I can do that on for this individual image. If I click into the next one and I start typing, these are just comma separated. anything it recognizes as you type, it will start trying to find it for you. Okay, so there's this little pop-up saying, is it right? So what I've got here, outside, outtakes, outdoor and outdoors. Field is fairly straightforward, okay. Or if we've got lots that are the same, I can select all of them and start putting them in. Again, the exact same way. So I can add keywords to 5, 10, 100 photos at a time if I like. If I went to this one, I would add in, say, flowers, for example. And if I went to this one here, I would say childs or children. It could be family related. I could go through that kind of snow, cold, all these kind of keywords, whatever you felt was relevant. Now, true to Adobe style, there's lots of different ways to do the same thing. So back down to the bottom part here, and you see this little spray can. This lets me paint one keyword at a time in any image I want. So I'm going to paint, I selected keywords, I'll pick in whatever I wanted. Okay, so I've got portfolio there just to say, right, these are the ones I want to keep as part of my portfolio. And anytime I go over the image, you'll see the icon, changing to a paint can, and literally just click each one. And if I pop that back down there, and I'll see that portfolio is now part of those keywords for those images that I clicked into. Okay. So different method, same result. There are suggestions, okay, ones that you use quite often. And there is even a full keyword list. Oh, that's maybe some ones. That's not what I'm trying to click into. So there we go, keyword list. And oops, I've been shooting for a long time, so I have a lot of different keywords. And what you can also use is keyword sets. And keyword set is basically if I have, let's say, a group of 6 keywords that I want to use together. So if I know fine well that I will shoot at a particular park, so I want the park name, I want outdoors, I want summer, I want 2021, and I want family, for example. I've got a set of keywords. I can use that set and just apply all those at once. So this is all in terms of the findability of your images, okay? Because what I have up here, just across the top bar now, if I click into text, and under here I say any searchable field, or I can change it specifically to keywords if I want. This is where like the metadata comes in, the file name and so on. I'll just leave it any. And I can say it contains. And if I then searched for trees, it's just going to filter out those ones that are relevant. Okay, if I click to clear that off, if I said I want to look at family photos, it's going to go just to the ones that I've tagged in that keyword. So say if you have 10,000 images across your Lightroom catalog, you can narrow it down very, very quickly using that search method, which is really good, particularly even for things like the theme that we run in the photo group. So if our theme happens to be trees, you can go through your whole 10,000 and pick out any images with trees in them.
I usually have to remember all mine by date and when I took them and everything. So it'd much be easier to have like all my dandelion photos in one folder.
Exactly.
All my deer photos in one folder. Yeah.
Well, that's me. They don't even need to be in one folder. I mean, they could be a big jumbled mess, but as long as they're in Lightroom, you'll be able to find them quickly and easily. So you just go there and type in dandelion, and it wouldn't make a difference where they were. You would find them all. And that may bring you 20 images within a second. You wouldn't have to go through all the folders. Right. Very quickly, we'll go into some of these other ones here as well. So you've got a few other options up here. So you've got attribute. And this basically lets you narrow down by a range of different things, which we've not quite come on to yet, but we'll come back to this one actually. You can search with your metadata. Okay. So the year it was taken, I can quickly flick through these if I wanted to. The camera that was used, So if you know you use different cameras, you can filter those out. So just with the Canon, there we go. The one with the Nikon D5200, that's my one, so that's them. I can even filter with the lens. So you quite often see people saying like, I'm thinking about getting this 85mm or this 50mm prime, can I see photos taken with it? You can pretty much instantly just go, right, that lens there, and that'll jump straight to those images. Okay. And you can just go none, it goes back to normal. Okay. Now, in terms of a flow, once you put your images into Lightroom, you then do what is called the cull. Okay, you start to go through them and decide which ones you want to keep and which ones are throwaways. And the easiest way to do this is using the pick and reject. So these are the flags within Lightroom. And again, multiple ways to do this. So down across the bottom here, first of all, I can rearrange them in different orders if I want them named, time order, whatever, I can do all that. But you've got these flags down here. So if I've got a flag, an image picked, and I say, this flag here is flag as pick. So if I click that, I get a little white flag in the corner there, and that one's picked. So I'll use that to say I want to keep this one. And I'll go to this one and think, well, that's pretty much the same. I prefer the first one. So I'll go to this one here, which is a black flag, which is flag as rejected. Set as rejected, sorry. And get this little black flag with a cross. So I know I don't want that one anymore. And I would just go through them. And for shortcuts, I can press the P button on my keyboard, and that will be a pick. I can press the X button on my keyboard, and that would be a reject. And that way, again, if you've got hundreds of photos, you can pretty quickly batter through them. Yeah, sometimes you'll need to look at them a bit closer, just to see what they are, if you want to keep them or not, and so on. But what I will then do is say, right, I know which ones I want to actually keep. So I'm going to come down to the bottom, and I'm going to click this little pop out here. In fact, no, not, that's nonsense. I'm going to come down even further. I'm going to go to filters here. And I would say flagged. So this is now only showing me my selected. So the ones that I have flagged as pick. That's going to filter out the rest. So it allows me to only focus on the ones that I know I've already picked as these are the ones I want to keep. Now let's just take these filters off a second. Again, there are multiple different ways to do this. Again, if you look into the bottom here, you've got star rating. So you've got, that's a 1 star, I really like that, that's a 3 star. Okay, that's maybe a 2. And again, I can use my keyboard. I can just press the keys 1 to 5. Right, that's a 5, that's a 4, that's a 2, and I can just go on through that way. And there's another way. You've also got color options as well. So if you preferred, I could say, right, green is for keep, red is I don't want them, and yellow is maybe I'm not quite sure yet. And then you can go through them that way. So lots of different ways to do lots of different things. Okay, my personal recommendation, the general guidance is use pick and reject. The P and the X, the white flag and the black flag. Okay, nice and straightforward. And just because you've set them doesn't mean you can't change them again. So if I come back through and say, actually, don't want that one, I'm going to reject that. I'm going to change this one to a pick. I'm going to press P and it changes it. This one isn't a 3 star. Now that I've looked at it a bit closely, it's only a 1 star. Okay, and you can just change it as you see fit. All I'm going to do is just select them all, press 0, take all the star ratings off, because I don't need any of them just now. So this little arrow here, just beside the thumbnail size scroller, is where you can decide if you want to see these or not. So this is everything just now, okay? I don't use the color labels, so I can take that away, and I don't use the ratings. Certainly don't click them anyway. And this just tidies up this bar a little bit. It's not quite so cluttered now. I can, again, use arrows down here to go through the different images. I can use arrows on keyboard. I can click through them. Multiple different ways to do the same things. One of the things Adobe is pretty well known for. So what I have now is all of my images, and I know which ones I want to keep, which ones I want to get rid of. Okay. What I'm going to do just now is just take these flags off because I don't need these shown just now. All I'm doing is clicking on there, and that takes them away again. Right, so I've got my images. Now, if I want to look into them a bit closer, I can come into the loop view, which is just the one image at a time. I think, right, okay, well, I don't quite know if I want to see that I don't quite know if I want to keep that or not. I've got my navigator window up in the top left corner here. And again, even with this, there's a few different options. So the default will be fit, which just means it fits the window that you're looking at it on. You got fill, which just means it fills the window. With fit, it's just got a little bit of a border around it. I've got 1:1, which is basically full size. So if this digital image was physical, that would be the size I'd be looking at it. Okay. And then you've got this other ratio as well. So again, little arrows. If I click on that, I can change what ratio I want that to be. So I said 1:2, that'll zoom in. And if I leave that set to there, anytime I click on the image, it will default back to that 1:2. Or whatever I decide to make it. Let's say 1:8. I'm zooming out now. Okay, you can basically go whichever way you like. 3:1, I mean, that's zooming in quite a bit. So probably not the most relevant. I tend to leave it the 1:2 or 1:3. So when I zoom in, I get a bit closer, but not anything too extreme. Okay, let's come back out of that. And when I'm zoomed in, I can just click and scroll around. I can just move the image around my screen as I wish. And I can also use the navigator window if I want to click over on this bit. I can just jump straight to that bit. Okay, so again, different ways to do the same thing. And let's come back out with that. So that's my navigator, and I think, right, I can see that now. Definitely happy in keeping that one. That's okay. The next part is I've got all my keywords in place. I'm happy with which ones I have selected. Another quite neat little trick, which I like to use, is, well, actually, first of all, whenever you're clicking into your images, be very careful where you're clicking, because I've been caught out by this so many times. Like I just showed you, if you clicked in that top corner, the flag appears or disappears. Okay, so if you just go, oh, I want that image, I haven't clicked that image, I've actually clicked the flag. And I can't understand why it's not gone into that one. If I click slightly underneath the image, it's hard to see and probably even harder on your screens, but the stars are in there. So you can accidentally rate it if you're not paying attention. Okay. There is a little circle that will appear here. And this is the really handy one. So it says there, add photo to quick collection. And I'm a big fan of the quick collection. Okay, so if I say, right, I want to focus on just these three, and I'll click that little button there, and that puts them in quick collection. What that is on this menu here, just under my navigator, I've got a few listings, all my photographs. Okay, I'm not going to show them all because there's 26,000. It's on default the previous import because that's the ones I've just brought into Lightroom. So that's the one of the things I want to look at. I've got that quick collection there. So anything that I put that I know I want to be looking at. So I use it great. It's great for these kind of workshops because I can just say, I'm just going to pop them in the quick collection. I don't want to keep them set up as a group of images forever. So I'm just going to pop this into the quick collection. And when I'm done with it, I can take them back out of it again. I can do it again just by clicking that little circle again, it goes away. The file hasn't gone anywhere, the image hasn't gone anywhere, it is still there as part of the import. That's just a separate little collection that you can use. And just for, again, multiple ways to do the same thing. If I right click on the image, I get these same options as well, okay? So I can open it in the loop view, the compare view, the reference, the different views are there. I won't go through each of these. I can set the flags, the ratings, the colors, and so on. I can add it to the quick collection. Okay, there's all these kind of different options. Okay, what I'm going to do is just take off these colors for now. And I'll just do that by, there's a color label and none. There we go. So this is all just to basically pick the images that you want. So there's quite a lot in there. I have got some basic adjustments in this library screen. Okay, so on the right-hand side here, I've got things like Sage presets. And again, this is where we showed you it's the same to put them on the import. I can do the black and whites. I can make some adjustments, which again, we'll come to in just a minute. I can adjust the white balance. So if I look at this and think, oh, let's bring this one up. The white balance is the yellow and the blue scale. Okay. So think, oh, that's not quite come out right. I want this in a different phase. That's gone very, very blue. So I'm going to leave these as shot just now. I've got tone control. I've got the exposure, so I can adjust the brightness in here. If it's too bright, I can go down by 1/3 of a stop at a time or full stop at a time. That's normal. And I've got a few other adjustments in here as well. Okay, now personally, I don't ever make these adjustments in the library screen because I use the library purely for organizing and picking the culling part of it. When I've done that part and I want to actually make some edits, I then go into the develop tab. Okay, and this is where the real magic happens. So let's jump into develop. Now, develop is where we're doing the actual edits. Okay, so you can only see one image at a time, or you certainly can't have the grid, because if you're obviously making edits, you're going to be doing it one photo at a time. And again, my left and right bars have completely changed. So these will continuously change depending on which tab you're in. And I'll just run through the editing options here. So straight off, right up at the top here, you've got your histogram. If you've ever used this, you kind of know what it is. But basically, it just is a graphic representation of the light, dark, and mid range of the image. If I want to start playing about with that, I can again just click and just start dragging. So all I'm doing there is because I've clicked in the middle, I'm adjusting the mid-tones. If I come down to the shadows, I can start doing that, and that is only going to adjust the shadows. I'm going to undo these. Now, if I go too far, again, I don't know what screen you're seeing this on, but you will have these little bits in the corners here, okay, these little darker parts in the corners. If I start going too far to one side, this is going to start giving me a little bit of a flag. And when I highlight over it, it's saying this area is too bright. You've gone too far with this, you need to fix this. And whether that's been done in editing or whether that has happened just as you've taken it, this is telling you there's something wrong with this part of the photo. And similarly, if I go the other way, if it gets too dark, you'll see this, depending on how bad it is. So just now, I can't really tell where that's showing me. Okay, so no, something's a bit too dark, but I can't even see. It's so minor, I can't see where. But if I keep it going, it starts changing color a little bit, right? Still can't quite see it. And if it gets far too ridiculous, it's going to really, really indicate these areas are too dark. I can leave those on all the time. If I click them, those warnings will always stay on. So the second that that starts going into a dangerous area, the blue will start showing up for the areas that are too dark. And the red will start showing up for the areas that get too bright. There we go. So it can be really helpful, just as an indicator, like you might want to focus on this bit here to start off with, okay? What you've also got there is your camera settings. So what your focal range was, your f-stop, your shutter speed, and your ISO. You then have a whole little bar of tricks, which I'll come back to. Some of these are the more advanced bits and pieces. Okay, so I will come back to these. I will do the first one though, which is your crop. Nice and simple. So if I click that, I then get the crop grid. And I can either just start dragging that to how I want that to be. I can just basically grab it from the corners, from the edges, whatever way I want to do it. But again, when I've clicked into it, my bar changes on the right-hand side here. So it's asking me about the aspect ratio. Now, no matter what side I grab from, it's keeping it in the same ratio because that padlock is there. If I unlock that and only drag the side, it's only going to drag that side. It's not going to keep it the same. Okay, so I can then start cropping any way that I like into whatever dimensions that I like. Let's just don't actually want to put that in just now. And even if I put it into a weird ratio like that, if I put that padlock back on again, it then keeps it in that ratio that I've changed it to. Okay. And all I'm doing here, guys, is just hitting Control and Z, which is the undo keyboard command, just to undo the things that I put into the system just now, okay? Just to keep it as standard as possible. And just beside that, you've also got the original, which is the original as it's shot. And if I say I want it square for, say, Instagram, I can just click one by one, and I don't have to guess if I'm getting that quite right or not. And I'll then make that a crop. If it's 5x7, because that's the size I'm going to be printing, I can put it in that way. And then move that as, you know, I want that to be over the trees. I'm going to put that there, and that's going to be my image. So we just hit enter. That's going to be my image. Okay.
I have a question, Andy.
Yeah, go for it.
So this ratio thing, what you were just doing, and you just said, if I'm going to print it as a 5x7, if you put it on that 5x7, does that then help you know how to crop it for printing a 5x7? Because I know sometimes I crop a photo and it looks like really great for social media, but then I might go to print, you know, a 5x7, and it's wherever I'm printing it, their cropping editor is cutting off and making things. So I've learned I can't crop too much.
Yeah.
Then I'm better off cropping it in the printing person's cropping editor. Or would this help me?
So this will crop it to the 5x7 size. So this is what gets a bit confusing, because Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I don't know about Pinterest and things, but they all have different ratios that they post an image at.
Right.
So Instagram is 1x1, they're square.
Yeah.
Facebook is slightly wider, and Twitter is almost landscape. It's like 16x9, I think it is. It's almost like a widescreen movie sort of size.
But if I want to crop a photo knowing I want to print it and put it as a 5x7 and putting in a frame, will this feature help me figure out how to actually crop it so that when I go to the printing place, their cropping editor isn't cropping it even differently?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So at the moment, just as the photo takes it, it's 4x3, I think it is. So let's say if I know fine well I want to print it as a 5x7, when I click 5x7, that's the dimensions I get for it.
Okay.
So I can move this around, I can change the size, but as long as that padlock is still locked, this is now locked to a 5x7 ratio.
And
So
it will print a 5x7 like
It
that.
will print exactly like that as a 5x7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
there
that
might be
makes
like
sense.
millimeter trims depending on the printers and things, but yeah, that's pretty
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, and there's a few other options there. So you've got like 6x4, which is a really common one. So
Yeah.
if I cropped it like that, hit enter, that should be exactly the way it prints out. Now, if I try and
Okay.
connect that to Instagram, for example, which is a square,
It'll be different.
it's
Yeah.
going to lose off the edges. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Okay. That makes
again, it depends on
sense.
how in depth with it you want to get, because you can save out 5 different versions if you wanted. You can save out your Instagram version, your Facebook version, your print version, do all that kind of stuff. But I won't go into that
Okay.
just yet. We'll come to that later.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so let's just put it back to as shot. Okay. And a couple of other little tools in here. So I've got the angle. So this is where you straighten up horizons. It's a pet peeve of mine, I'm not going to lie. Anytime I see a squint horizon, it's such an easy fix. And it's just by using this angle slider here. Okay. And again, all I'm doing is clicking on my mouse and moving it along. As you can see, that's fairly hard to control. If you're trying to get it just right, it's quite difficult. So if I click on it, it's narrowed down that grid so I can see my straight lines better. And I can use my scroll mouse just to make smaller adjustments. Okay, I can make it a little bit finer. But, and here's one of the tricks with it, is the mouse has to stay over that slider. Because as soon as I move it off of there, the grid screen changes and that mouse just starts scrolling up and down the menu again. Okay. So as long as it's there, I can scroll, no bother. If I come off, it's going to scroll a different thing. It takes a little bit of getting used to when you first start, but it's just one of the things you kind of learn to get used to. So this is your first introduction to sliders, which you'll see there's quite a lot of in Lightroom. It's pretty standard. And again, no matter what editing platform you use, most of them use sliders like this. Within Lightroom specifically, again, different ways to do the same thing. So showing you there, clicking and dragging. I've shown you the scroll. I can also just click onto the number and say, I know I want to move that by 2 or by 10. Whatever it happens to be. I can also click that number, and while I hold in the mouse button, I can also slide it using that as well. So there's like 4 different ways to adjust the same thing. Okay. And I thought it was fine where it started. I can just put a 0. I can also double click on the word angle, which will reset it. And similarly, I can just double click on the slider itself, which will reset it again. Okay, so again, 3 different ways to do the same thing. The good part about this is it means you can find a way that suits yourself really well. So if I want to reset something, I always just double click on the word and it resets it like that. It's fine. So that's cropping. Okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Into the adjustment side. So we're looking at this panel section here now. So this is what's known as the basic adjustments, okay? And Kathy, I think you mentioned that these are the parts that affect the whole image, okay? It's the difference between what's known as global adjustments and local adjustments. Global is the whole image, local is very specific parts of it. So this basic part affects it all. First off, we've got treatment, which is color in black and white. So if I want it to be black and white, it's as simple as clicking that button, and vice versa, okay? There's a profile. I would suggest don't mess around too much with this profile. You can say landscape, and it'll make some adjustments for you and think, oh, that's enhanced the colors, that's fine. And you can do the same for portrait. You can do the same for vivid to make things pop out a bit more. These are almost like, they're not quite presets, but essentially that's what they're doing, okay? You'll have these same options within your camera where you've got standard portrait, landscape, vivid, those kind of options. I always just leave that as its normal default as Adobe Color because I'll be doing the adjustments manually. Even the same within black and white, you've got monochrome, that's all it's going to go to. Okay, next we have white balance. So again, this is what we've seen in the library side, but it's better to do it in development because this is where you do the editing part. Exact same options, daylight, cloudy, and again, you have these options within the camera itself, but if it hasn't quite caught it just right, you can adjust this. And if you find that one of these auto options don't work for you, so I'll put it back to as shot, this temperature is your white balance, okay? So sliding up the way is adding the yellow side of things. I'll take it to an extreme just to demonstrate. And sliding it down the way to the left is bringing the blue side of things. So that's ideal if you have shot something maybe out in the snow and it looks particularly cold and blue. You can add just a little bit of warmth. Even this shot is a fairly cloudy, foggy sort of day, as you can see there. And I can just say it wants just to be a little bit warmer in the colors. So I'll just bring that up just a touch. I'll reset it like there, for example. And then simple as that, I've reset it. You can see the difference that makes. What you'll notice as well, and this is an easy way to find out if you've made an adjustment or not. If you look at the numbers here on the temp, which are currently 4850, this is the Kelvin rating. Okay, so this is the actual Kelvin number of the white balance. That's basically grayed out. If I change it, it lightens up. It goes into a white font color, white text color. So I know anything that has a white text on that side is something I've made a change to. You've also got the tint, which is less used, but is the difference between the greens and the purples. And again, it's just all about balancing out the colors. Again, if I go to one extreme, it's ridiculous. And same the other way. Can I just a little bit of the purple? Doesn't look purple at all. And I think that if there's too much green, you can balance it out that way a little bit. And again, to the extreme is quite extreme. But this is how you balance out your custom white balance. You then got the tone. You have got an auto button. If I click that, it will do all these adjustments for you, and it will try and do its best to what it thinks looks like a good image. And to be fair, it's actually done pretty well on that one. Normally, you don't get quite such good results. Now, one of the best things about Lightroom is, or a lot of these edit programs, is it's non-destructive. Okay, so if you compare it to Photoshop, for example, anything you adjust, you are adjusting the image. You are destroying pixels. You are changing pixels. You are fundamentally changing the image itself. But like I said, because the image exists in the computer somewhere, you're not adjusting the image. You're adjusting this cover version of it. So all of these changes can all be undone. You are never destroying that original file. You can make an absolute mess of it. You can reset them one by one if you like. Or down here, there's a reset button. And clicking that just brings everything back to normal. Doesn't matter if you save it, doesn't matter if you come out of Lightroom, you are never destroying the original image. So you can't do anything too wrong. So we'll just quickly run through these. Exposure, hopefully a self-explanatory one, is just how light or dark it's going to be. Okay, and I will just do some extreme adjustments just so you can see the difference here. Contrast. There's Sherry just joining in. Hi, Sherry. I don't know if you've been caught out by the time difference, but we're about an hour into it already. You're more than welcome to stay and carry on. You can catch up the replay as well if you like. Feel free to stay in for this live section just now and catch up the replay for the first hour. Right, okay, so sorry, the contrast. And you've probably seen something along these kind of lines, okay? The contrast is bringing out changing the difference of the balance between the lights and the shadows, okay? So the darks get a little darker, lights tend to get a little bit lighter, and you'll see in the histogram where it's making these differences as well. So if I bring the contrast up, for example, it's flattening out that mid-range, pushing the lights up and pushing the darks down. And if I bring the contrast up too far, it's bringing the darks down to the point where it's giving me that warning again. And this is the one thing, particularly when you first get started with editing, is it's easy to go too far, and it's something to be very wary of. And I'll continue to kind of demonstrate this as I go through. Highlights are the lighter sections. And again, even in the histogram, it's showing where in that picture there's going to be changing. So this is highlights. There's not a huge amount in that range, so it's not going to make a lot of difference here. But I expect the sky to brighten up more than it already is, or darken down. So again, I can move it to the right, it's getting brighter. Move it down to the left, it's getting darker. It's plus and minuses. And all these same changes with the sliders apply. I can click the number, slide it from there. I can type in a number if I want to do that. I can double click the word to reset it. They all apply the same way. Shadows, same way, but in the darker regions. So I can make the shadows darker. I can make the shadows lighter. Got the whites and the blacks, which are the more extreme versions of the highlights and the shadows. So again, if you've seen the histogram here, these are the very, very far ends, whereas the lights and the shadows are more the border lines. So the whites are going to come up and going to come down, and this is affecting the whole image still. Same with the blacks. This is the really dark sections. I mean, you can see there that warning is back big time because there's too much dark. Not even just the shadow in the trees anymore, but even patches of the grass down at the front here is just too dark. Under the presence here, you've got clarity. Again, this is one of the ones that is very easy to overdo. Clarity is great just for really defining the edges. If I take this a bit to an extreme, I'll show you. It just really clears out the edges. Okay, so it takes away, and again, if I bring it to the other side, it softens it all down, gives it an almost dreamy type effect. Dehaze is great for misty days. If you're ever at an event that has a smoke machine, as long as it's not too thick, obviously, it can be really helpful. I do a lot of award show, or used to do a lot of award shows, and you can see how much it's sort of almost dehazed, demisted the cloud that was in the sky there, and it's brought out a lot more of that blue detail that was behind it. And again, can take that the other way and just almost put fog into the shot. Okay, doesn't look great. Vibrance, you can see what difference that's making. How vibrant are the colors? Are they like super strong, or are they quite muted? And saturation is similar. It is very easy to get the two of them mixed up, but this is the amount of color rather than the strength of color. And you can play about with these until your heart's content. So this is your basic adjustments panel. Okay, you can do quite a lot of your adjustments in here, and you'll never need to touch anything else, especially when you're first getting started. This is the really best place to start on the editing side of things. Now we'll quickly run through the rest of these as well. Tone curve does a lot of the same sort of things, but gets a bit more advanced and gets a bit more fine control. Even within tone curve, there are multiple options. And by default, it's in this kind of linear view. And it's the same things. Okay, so I've got my lights, my darks, my highlights, my shadows. And wherever I'm moving the mouse across here, it's telling me which section I'm going to be adjusting. And all we do is click on a point. So let's say I want to adjust some of the lights. Click on it, hold my mouse button, and move this up or down to make the adjustments. Okay. The part of the finer control comes in that the rest of it is absolutely locked in place. So you can see when I'm doing this, the points to the left and the right are not moving at all. It is just that curved point that I'm adjusting. If you do want to get more in depth, which I'm almost, yeah, let's very quickly break into it. You can simply click medium contrast and strong contrast, and it will do that for you. And you can see how that's adjusted the sliders a little bit. So it's the darks have come down a bit, the lights have come up a bit. And if you want to get really, really technical, if you click into this little bit here, which gives you more control. Okay, so the default almost has like stabilizers on. You now have complete control around just how extreme these changes are going to be, which, as you can see, can be pretty dangerous, depending on what you want to do with it. One of the sort of standard nice looks, if you like, is what's known as an S-curve. So if we bring up these highlights just a little and bring these shadows down a little bit, it can give a nice contrast. Obviously, it depends on the image. We've got quite a bright, almost blown out sky as it is anyway. So bring the highlights up really overdoes that. Let's just reset that.
I'm not sure I understand this curve, the tone curve.
This is getting a bit
I've
more.
got it on my Snapseed or whatever Photoshop. I've got it on there, and I've played around with it, but I don't really. Yeah.
It is definitely a more complicated one. And if you're just starting out, then I'd probably recommend just avoiding that for now.
Okay.
Stick to your sliders. And let's say this crash course, there's only so much we can cover in this, but we could do a whole session just on tone.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because even there's more to it than what I've just shown you there. I mean, you can go into the red green channels, you can adjust the reds. And
what were you doing there? Was it doing that based on the information you'd already set?
So no, every time I'm adjusting something, I reset it again. So I'm keeping this as default as possible as I go.
So that's just really selecting like an area.
It's very, very similar. And like I say, unless we go into a lot of detail in this, we don't have time for today.
No.
But it's doing a very, very similar job. It gives you a little bit more fine control over it, particularly when you go into the full curve, if you like. So where I'm clicking, so let's just stay with this section here, okay? As I bring that up, that is as far as I can bring that up. I cannot go any further than that. And same with the down, I can't go any lower. I can't change it overly too much, so I can't like entirely ruin it. So that's what I'm saying. That's almost like having the stabilizers on when you start getting into the tone curve side. If I click this little button down in the bottom corner, that safety net disappears, and I can be really extreme with this. So when you get into like really fine detail, this is more in terms of toning the contrast in exactly the way you want. If you want to try and go like cinematic looks and feels and things, so it is definitely a more advanced option. So I'd probably recommend just leaving that closed for just now until you get used to the sliders. And then once you're comfortable with those, you can start digging a little bit deeper into the tone curve side. What is beneficial is the next one down, which is the HSL stroke color. And HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. Sorry. That's a lot of talking. I'm going to start doing vocal exercises or something. So if you're not playing with these, that's fine. So we'll go through them again just one by one. So the hue is the toning in the color. Now, within Lightroom itself, it's a little bit limited, especially compared to Photoshop. I mean, you can go to the full range of colors in Photoshop, but that's not the purpose of Lightroom. This is more for your basic adjustments. So for example, I've got all my different colors here, red, orange, through to blues and greens and purples. If I decided that my green grass was not green enough, I could change it a little bit, but if I go too far, it doesn't look natural anymore. And similarly, if I bring it the other way, I can make it into the yellow side. Now, this could be kind of handy if I want to make an image look a little bit more autumnal. So if I'm maybe going out early autumn and it's still a little bit too green and I want it to have those more sort of yellow and browny type colors, I can just come into the hue and give it that little bit more of the yellow inside. Same with the yellows. Again, I can adjust these. I can push them into the greens. I can bring them down toward the reds. And you can see on each line what the color range is. So for example, the purple here, well, if there's no purple in this image, that's not going to work. I don't think there's really much red in this one either. I'm going to skip these just now. Okay, but you can see the orange, for example, moves from the yellow to the right-hand side closer to the reds, and the reds moves to the orange into the purple, and it just basically goes in a loop. Okay. If you're unsure exactly what the color is, so I would look at that and think, right, the grass is green, excuse me, so I'm going to adjust my green. I do that, and I find actually that's not quite. There's whole patches that aren't getting picked up by that. There's this little circle just in the corner of that particular window there. And if I click that highlights, and then you'll see the icon changing. So it's got this little circle with a couple of arrows beside it and a little plus. And wherever I point this on the screen, you'll see the colors at the side changing. So it's on green just now. If I move, it moves on to the yellow. So that's one of the yellow patches. If I come up here into this sort of shaded area of the trees, that's actually blue. So if I want to adjust that section, it would be the blue sections that I want to adjust, okay? And again, what I can do on, let's say, the green sections, I can click and hold, and I can move my mouse up or down, and it's adjusting what it's picked up in that shot. So it's picking up greens and some yellows as well. And all I'm doing here is scrolling up and down on my mouse, just literally moving my mouse up and down, sorry, while I'm still holding in the button. And then when I'm happy with it, I let it go. And I can go on to adjust this section up here. The blue's going a little bit extreme, but again, extreme just to demonstrate the difference it actually makes.
So what are you holding down?
Just the left mouse button, just the normal mouse click.
On the photo or over on the bar?
On the photo itself, sorry. So you can see where my icon is just now.
Okay.
So wherever that icon is determining what colors the bars are picking up.
Okay. So
sorry.
And then when you click on it, it activates the two colors on the bar.
One or two, depends on whatever it's picking up.
One
so
or two,
like this section here, this is really just yellow. So as I slide this, it's got a little bit of green. So you see the yellow's moving quite a bit.
I gotcha. Okay.
Moving a little. So it's looking at the image and thinking, this is the colors that I'm detecting as Lightroom's detecting it. And so this is the ones I'm adjusting. Okay. And then just click that again, that switches that off and you go back to your normal navigation.
So is that like a little bit of a time saver as opposed to just adjusting green and then yellow, and it like allows you to kind of maybe do it at the same time?
It depends entirely on what it is you exactly want to achieve. So it's more so if you're not sure about the color. So like I say, if I click on that, because I would look at a line of trees and think that's going to be green. I want to adjust the greens. But actually, when you look into the shadow section, it's the blue.
It's the blue. Okay.
Blue.
So sometimes Lightroom sees it differently than you might.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I would look at a tree and think I need to change the blue color for a tree, but that's the way it's picking up, particularly because the shade is getting the blues from the shadow.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Cool. Right. So that's the hue. Okay. So that's literally changing the actual color. Saturation, like we mentioned, is how much of the color exists. So if we grab the green, I can make that stronger, or I can take out any saturation of the green, and this is just taking it all away. Same with the yellow. A lot more yellow in there, or take it out completely. And this is running through them, guys. Okay, I will come back to a couple more sort of use cases around like what you can do with each of these. Okay, this is just demonstrating what they do just now. Let's just reset these. And then you've got the luminance, which again, as mentioned earlier, is the brightness of the color. So again, if I adjust the yellows, the yellow sections get quite bright or quite dark. And again, same with the greens. They get much brighter or they get much darker. Okay. So that's just adjusting those sections. And again, there's a few different ways to do this. Clicking in through the hue, the saturation, and the luminance one by one. If I click on all at the side here, I've still got the exact same three windows, three little boxes. They're just all shown at once. And if I want to go into the color, which is right beside the HSL part, this lets me see all of them for the colors at a time. So I can just see all of them again. So there's the reds, the orange, yellows, and so on. Or I can just click green. So I know I want to adjust quite a lot, but only on the greens. So I've now got hue, saturation, and luminance in one place, but just for all the greens. So this entirely comes down to personal preference of way of working. What do you want to focus on? Is it specifically the color you want to adjust, or is it you just want to have a play about, tweak saturation, tweak the hues, and so on? What I tend to use the HSL side. Okay, so that can be really useful. And again, I'll come to exactly how we use these sections. Okay, this is just literally what they do at this point. Split toning, again, is definitely more advanced, more complicated, so I'm not going to go into this in much detail. Because again, I can say, right, let's say green, I want to add some saturation of green, which as you can see makes quite a difference. And that's for the highlights. But I say I want my shadows to be blue. And I'm going to add more saturation into the blue. And this is getting much more creative. It's getting much more fine-tuning, because you're obviously not going to go this far with any of these edits. So I wouldn't worry too much about this one just now. It's just to let you know that you can adjust the highlights and the shadows separately based on their individual hue colors. Okay. Let's come out here. Right, detail. This is a nice simple one. Sharpening, always worth doing. Again, it's something you can overdo. The amount is just how much of the sharpening of the image you want to do. Radius is the pixels essentially that you're using to make the image sharper and how big you want those pixels to be.
So go back to sharpening. So can you actually make an image worse by doing too much sharpening?
Absolutely, yes. You can.
What is it actually doing?
So it's essentially fining up the edges a little bit. It's similar to the clarity, but it's not nearly as in depth. Okay. Personally, I find Lightroom is very difficult to see specifics in what it's doing. So what I'm going to do here is this little exclamation mark here. Okay. If you click this is going to really zoom in. Okay. And to be honest, I don't think this will be the best image for this one. So let's do something a little bit different here. What I'm going to do is pop back to the library section and pick a different image. I think maybe these dandelions. I'm going to come back into develop. Okay, so sharpening. So I'm going to click this exclamation mark again, and it's going to zoom in really closely. Okay. So this is obviously quite a zoomed in version. And it is difficult to see. And again, it's probably going to be even harder for you because you're seeing it through your screen, which is a copy of my screen and so on. But if I increase the sharpening, I'm going to go quite extreme just so you can see the difference. If I bring this right off, you can see the surrounding sections are soft because of the depth of field, okay, which is the way Tanya's intended it. If I over sharpen, I'm just making them really, really stand out. I'm cutting the edges pretty much harshly. So there's no, I'm taking away the flow of what I'm looking at. So I can look at this and think, yep, that's a nice, little thread of the seed there. It just kind of flows off nice and natural. If I take that too extreme, it's very, very harsh. I've taken away some of that depth of field because I have made everything, well, not everything, but I've made it much sharper. And it's not just the part I want it to be, it's kind of everything. If I increase the radius on that as well, you can see, again, it's, hopefully you're seeing this okay on the screens, but you can see the difference that makes. So I'll bring it right down and then bring it right back up. It's just getting really, it's almost hard on the eye to look at. It doesn't look natural anymore. And again, if I do the same with the detail, bring it right up. Yeah. It now has completely destroyed that image. Sorry to do this to your image, Tanya. It's just for demonstration, don't worry. Okay, so again, just
yeah, well, because I do a lot of this on my phone, so it's so hard with such a small screen. I haven't done any editing on a computer screen, so it's when I do that slide up and down, I actually cannot see any difference.
It is hard, and I'm quite glad we've got this shot actually because there's so many little fine fibers in the seeds there. It's probably a really good one to actually demonstrate it on. So what I would normally do is I pretty much always do a touch of sharpening in an image. Okay, so personally, I tend to go for about 65 or 70, between 60 and 70 on the amount. Okay, it's nothing horrendous. And again, I'll just take this off just so you can see the difference. So I would add just a little bit there, and I would touch the radius up just a touch to about 1.5 thereabouts. And that's about it. And again, to be fair, with this particular image, I probably wouldn't even do that because if we're looking this closely, I don't really want this image that sharp because part of the appeal of this one, the visual appeal, is the shallow depth of field. So I wouldn't really want to over sharpen this at all. Now, obviously, we are looking very, very close here. Okay, we're looking at the full 1:1 version. So this is where the navigator side has taken us with that exclamation mark. So this is very, very close in. Whereas if I just take all of this off, take that right up to the full end, it's quite difficult to see the difference. And you see it a little bit around the edges, but it's not nearly as pronounced. Okay. Again, we'll do the same with the radius side.
What is radius? Is there another word for it at all? Another, Snapseed or what?
I use Lightroom, so I'm not
couldn't-
familiar with all the different apps. And there probably is. Normally, you have just sharpening, and there's a single slider for it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
without knowing each individual.
No, I think I've only had
program.
sharpening. Yeah.
And same with detail as well. So basically, if I take everything there, so that's everything up absolutely full. And if I just reset it back to normal, that's the difference it makes. Okay, so we're going from that to that. So I would say that's a nicer shot like that. So for most, like I say, I would add a little bit of extra sharpening just about there.
Is it laid out in Lightroom in the order that you should actually do them in? Does it take you through, like, you crop first, then you address this first and that?
Not really, no. The order is entirely up to you. Everyone will have their own way.
Is there a better order? Is there a correct, a better order?
Personally, I do tend to work it that way because I think it flows fairly well. But again, there is no right or wrong on how you choose to do your editing. So what I will always recommend is do all your global adjustments first, okay? And that's all we've looked at so far. It's just affecting the whole image. So what I would say is get your warmness of your shot right, get the brightness of it correct. In fact, quite often I'll do the exposure first because the brightness is most important. And then I'll adjust that, because if I brighten this up, let's say if I brighten it up to there, and then I think, actually, now I've brightened it up, I brightened up the sunlight as well. It doesn't need to be quite as warm as I thought it did. So if I put that to the same place, I've now overdone it. So I tend to do the brightness and the contrast, which is my personal preference. I always like to add a little bit of contrast, just helps an image pop. Sometimes a flatter image does work. Again, entirely personal preference. And I would just do these adjustments individual and maybe add a touch of clarity. I mean, again, that's going extreme. Okay, and this is how we can easily overdo an edit. Again, same on the other way. If I take that the other way, it just destroys it. So maybe add just a little touch, just to help define those edges just a bit. The sharpening's in there. I probably wouldn't play too much, certainly not with this one. I wouldn't really play with the color side of things. But if I was going to be doing that, I'd start doing that next. Sharpening is pretty much standard. I pretty much do the same thing on all images. So like I say, I will come back to running through a couple of edits, guys, okay? I just want to bash through these ones just now. What we also have under the detail section is your noise reduction. Now, noise reduction, hopefully you know, for noise is the dappled effect, okay? The sort of the static, the dots that go into an image. Normally, if you shot really high ISO, or if it's been like far, far too dark and you've tried to up the brightness in it, you'll see all these little parts, okay? And noise reduction is very, very similar to the sharpening, but it's taking those dots away rather than adding in the definition. And if I show, in my quick collection, I wonder if I have one that will work for this. Let's just say if I could just go into, tends to show up more in the dark. And that's actually not too bad, to be honest. Irritatingly enough, I don't really have a lot of photos that have too much noise in them because I do my best to avoid it as much as possible. But essentially, as I say, it's almost like the opposite of the sharpening. Okay, where you have all those little little dots across the image, the denoise tries to take those away. And it's done just, again, using sliders, increasing the luminance, the detail, and the contrast. I do have an image which I will dig out, and I'll come back to this one, okay? I did have it selected before, and I actually took it off because I swapped it out for a different one. I wonder, actually, I think this one might actually work. They've come nice and close. Right, so the, oops, too much. That is, so there's only a 250 on this one. I'm not sure if this one's going to work here. Yeah, okay, right, that's fine. So we can see this a little bit. I'm going to zoom in ridiculously close, just so we can see what it's doing. Right, now obviously you don't normally look at an image this closely, okay? So if you can see in the navigator screen, we are looking at a very small section of this entire image. So this is real pixel peeping now. But if we come to the noise reduction, so you can see on the screen the dappled effect, the noise that's there, okay? And as I raise this up, I'm just going to the extreme, it's going to start to smooth those out. But again, you can go too far, because if I take it too far, I'm losing the definition. It's smoothed them out so much that it's just taking away the actual lines of the bark and so on the tree. So again, you just want to be doing little touches with this. Again, we'll just go for demonstration, we'll go right up. We can bring some of this detail back in by sliding this up the way. Okay, so I'm getting some of that back. Again, if I take it the other way, I'm just smoothing it out even worse. This is now destroying this completely. And contrast will again help bring back a little bit of that definition just by changing the lights and the darks within these sections. Okay. So pretty much for most of this, guys, this is a crash course, okay? Hopefully this is giving you the top view. The best way you're going to learn it is start playing about with it yourself, okay? When you get actually hands-on, taking your images, having a play around, and seeing what they can do. Okay, right. Lens correction. Let's zoom back to a normal size here. Oops. Lens correction can be handy. Very simple one is enable profile correction. And if I click that, what that's going to do is take into account any known issues with lenses and cameras and so on, just to try and balance out the shot as much as possible. I'm just going to tick it. As long as your Lightroom is kept up to date, the lens profiles will be constantly updated. So it's instantly recognized what lens I used for this shot, and it's just made that adjustment. Sometimes it's pretty minor. Sometimes it can take away the darkening in the corners, for example, is one of the main benefits you tend to see. So you could maybe see to some extent any distortion that's in there. It's going to do its best, know that that exists in a certain lens, and try and sort it for you. So I generally will tick that box. And chromatic aberration, again, partly in a good way, is not one I have to demonstrate. Ever taken a photo and it's got that sort of purple shading around the edges? Particularly if it's bright things, a bright shirt, for example, you can have like little bits of purple lining around the edges, okay? And that is known as chromatic aberration. And all that tick box does is takes that away. So really quick, really simple, nice little edit tip, tick a box, gone. Really handy, that one. There's a few more here. Again, guys, I'm not going to go into any amount of detail in these. This is transform. This is where if you want to start adjusting, trying to make things look like they're on a bit of an angle. Okay, but again, you can absolutely take this far too far because it will stretch out ridiculously. Same if in the horizontal, I can say, you know, I want to kind of look at a bit more like I'm looking down the side rather than just looking at it straight on. I can play about with this. Effects is handy enough. There's two main ones in here. So you have the vignette, which can, again, be very, very overused. When people do things like this, it's just extreme, but a little touch of a vignette can work quite well. And again, you've got a few different options here. Again, we'll just extreme this just for demonstration. Midpoint is just how enclosed that center circle is, because the vignette is just the darkening around the edges. The roundness is just as it says. Does it make it more square? Does it make it more round, basically? More or less round. Feathering is how soft those edges are. So if we bring it one way, it's going to be a very almost solid line. If I bring it the other way, it's going to be a very soft transition. And highlights. If I don't want this to show in the lighter areas, I can bring the highlight section up. And again, I can do it to a various extent. So I can.
Some of the comments I've read about vignette is that it's generally not used in with landscape photos.
Tends not to be, no.
Tends not to, but some people I've noticed it seems to create like a kind of binocular effect.
All right, okay. That is more like an overlay. That's probably a bit more into full-on Photoshop. Or specifically, they've just got like a filter or something they can add into it.
Yeah.
So a vignette is just the edges. Okay, you can't really make shapes with it.
Mm.
If I bring this the other way, so that was bringing it to the left, that's a dark vignette, which tends to be what is done. If it is done, if I bring it to the other side, you'll end up with a white vignette, the exact same thing, so just white, which is done even less often than a dark one is. I think it's just one of those fads that people tend to go through now and then. It can work rarely, particularly if you're trying to do like a dreamy type effect. And then grain as well. So although we've just said grain is normally something to be avoided, some people do like to add it in, particularly if they're going for maybe like a film look, an old film look, or if they wanted to be like a little bit grungy, they can put in additional grain and that will add in a little bit of noise. Okay, so if I again zoom in just to demonstrate. So that's at normal. I'm adding in more grain into the shot. That is a creative choice, not one I normally do very often. I'm not going to go into calibration because that is really fine tuning. I don't need that for today. So that is that main panel, okay? Now, we have another couple of options up here. Now this, Kathy, this is the one you were asking about, the spot removal, okay? So if I was editing this photo, the first thing that's popping out to me is right in the middle here. I'll zoom in, not quite that far. I've got this little pylon, okay? Let's bring that back just a bit. If I click spot removal, I've got, again, this little bar here changes, and I've got a few options. First two is clone and heal. Okay, so actually, let's just zoom this in a little bit closer. Even a little closer on that. There we go. So the size is quite self-explanatory. Let's just adjust the size of the circle that I'm using, and the circle is going to be what I'm using to select the sections that I want to use, okay? The feather, very similar to what we've just seen in the vignette, how soft are the edges of the adjustment that I'm going to make. And the opacity is going to be how see-through is it. Let's actually just come just a little. So all I'm going to do is, with this selected, I'm going to adjust the size. I can scroll with my mouse scroll here to adjust the size. And if I hold in Shift and scroll, I can adjust the feather. Okay, so there's a couple more little shortcuts in there. Let's make this fairly small. Basically, don't want it to be too much bigger than the actual object that I'm trying to take away. So if I just click and essentially paint over that pylon there. Clone is going to, whatever section, and this is where the little odd little shapes and circles appear that you're talking about, Kathy. So this is telling me what section it is that Lightroom is using to replace it. And sometimes it gets it pretty right. So if I just hit enter and select that. So if I was looking at that, I would never know that there was a thing there. Okay, that was absolutely fine. If I click it again, you get this little pin, this little gray pin. And if you have 5 of these adjustments, you'll have 5 of these little gray pins. If you just click on one of them, it highlights with a little black dot in the middle of it. What sometimes happens is it doesn't always get it right. So for example, if I tried to, let's say, remove this part up here, it's done not bad. And it's taken a section from away across here to try and balance it out. But what I've got now... Does
it do that automatically?
It does that automatically, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I've got is this line is now right in the middle of this field. Now, again, if I'm looking at this way back here, I'll probably never notice it. But sometimes, sometimes, yes, you do end up with, like, particularly in portraits, you'll end up with like an eyeball in the middle of a cheek or something ridiculous. Okay, it can be quite extreme the way it does it. But if you don't agree with it, let's just get rid of these. If you want to get rid of them, click onto the one, hit delete button, it goes away. Okay, so let's just come back to this one. If you don't agree with it, if I click and hold anywhere in this circle shape that it's made, I can just drag that around and say, actually, I think if you pick from here, it's going to make a better image. Okay, obviously, for example, if I put it there, it's going to look ridiculous. So it will always do its best to match it up as best as it possibly can. But that is clone. That is an exact, whatever is in that shape, it is going to just copy it across exactly.
Okay, so the way you did that was you clicked on that black dot.
I click on the black dot to highlight it. So again, if I had two of these, let's just say that shape was over there. It's going to be a gray peg.
Oh.
Okay, and the one that is selected, if I click on it, I then get a black dot in there, and that's the one that's active. That's the one I'm working on now.
Okay, because then those turn green. And so now, okay, but so like now that one you probably don't want there because it put that black dirt there.
Yes, so I definitely.
How do you say, I don't want that?
So I just drag it around. I just drag it and say, actually, I'm going to take it from here.
Oh.
So all I'm doing, anywhere in that section at all, you can absolutely grab the dot if that's easier, but anywhere that's in that circle section that has been kind of sectioned off.
You drag it to where you find a spot that would match what you're trying to. Oh, okay.
Okay. So that, like I said, that's clone. That is picking exactly whatever it happens to see in this section.
Okay.
The other option there is heal. Works the exact same way, but it tries to match. So if I click heal, it's going to try and match it better. So clone, you've got this dark section, and Lightroom's going to think, I know that doesn't fit in that image. Okay, it doesn't match any of the surrounding colors or anything. So go heal, it's going to try and fix it. Again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So for example, let's just delete this one and just do the heal again. So just paint up over the bit I want removed. It's going to select automatically. And the difference between clone and heal on this one is very, very minor because it's picked a section where it matches quite well. Okay. Let's just let's see how this works. If I move that over there a little bit, I've got this extra brown patch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going heal. It's going to try and match it a little bit better. So it's softening down that brown patch. So say it won't always get it right. Photoshop is a stronger option for that, but Lightroom can normally do pretty well about 90% of the time. So if you put it back to where it was before, I say, yeah, I'm happy with that, hit return. This is still selected, okay, so I've still got my pegs. I can either click into here or just hit enter again. That unselects, it goes back to normal view. And if I zoomed out, I would never know that pylon existed.
Okay, so you were hitting enter to sort of get out of all of that cloning stuff.
Exactly. Or again, I can just click on that icon again. So it's like switching it on and off by clicking it.
Okay, because that's my problem. I'll get into something and then it's like, how do I stop what I'm doing?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Normally just click on the same icon, try escape button.
Okay.
The kind of usual methods of getting out.
Okay.
Let's just say like I'm going to be really ridiculous.
Is this in Photoshop as well?
Sorry?
Can you do this in Photoshop as well?
They're different tools, but yes, you can obviously remove objects in Photoshop as well. But there is still a clone, stamp, and healing brush, a spot healing brush, but they are different tools, and they work a little bit differently. So for example, I've just taken all the sheep out of that field.
Yeah. So you started once with your original circle to remove a sheep. And everywhere you removed a sheep, it left a circle, so you know what you've done. Yeah,
absolutely. So each are ones that have done it. So I can click into them and it will basically bring that back up again. So I can go and adjust that one. So like this one here has taken more of the wall. I don't think that one matches very well. I'll move that one around. That's okay. That's fine there. This one's done all right. Or if I think I've not quite got the whole thing, I can even readjust the size of the circle.
Okay.
Okay.
And so you're doing that by clicking in any of those circles. It makes it become active.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. There we go. And obviously you can be utterly ridiculous with it, but you know, you can take it to any extreme that you like.
Okay.
If I don't want that one, I just click delete. So as long as it's active, so they're essentially grayed out, but they are there. If I click it, it becomes active. This little
And-
box highlights again. I can just click delete and it's gone.
So when it becomes active, the circle that the arrow is coming from is the circle where it's pulling the data.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's just say I do this bit here. So that's where it's pulling it from. Yeah.
Okay. From the one where the arrow is starting.
No, the section where the arrow's
This-
starting, the one
yeah,
on the
okay.
right hand side just now, that's the bit that I've said I want to change this. Whereas
Oh.
on the arrow 2, this is saying this is the bit I'm using to change it.
Is where it's pulling from. Okay. Okay. That's not easy.
Oh,
That's not an
actually-
easy tool.
I'm confusing myself now. Hold on. Hang on a second. let's start it again. So let's take this pile on here. Right, there we go. Sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. So where it's arrowing in 2 is the bit that is changing. Okay, so it's basically what it's saying is I am taking this section and I'm moving it to the part you wanted changed.
Okay.
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 I can move that as well, but then obviously I'm just
Okay.
messing it up even more. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. It does take some getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's super helpful. So
Yeah.
like taking off spots if it's portraits and things like that, removing crisp packets out of a patch of grass, bins that are in the background that you didn't notice when you're taking photos outside, that kind of stuff. It's really, really helpful for that. Okay. Right, let's go into some of these use cases. So I've got this option here. This is a stock image. I'm glad to say I don't take photos with red eye anymore. So first off, I'll say this is the wrong way around. Now this is one that I can adjust in the library section because you've got these little arrows down here. And I can use these to rotate 90 degrees at a time just by clicking there. Okay. Bring this back into develop. It's the right way up now. So the next one, this little bar here is sorry, red eye correction. And when you hover over it, the center goes red. It's a bit of a dead giveaway. Again, you get some options. This comes up and you get a little bar. Okay. Now I'm using my scroll mouse here to say how big or small the section is I want it to focus on. And if I just click it, it's going to work itself. And it's going to say, right, this is where I think the red eye exists. And if I just click out of that, it's done not bad. Let's just reset that. See how much difference there is. So it's taken a fair chunk of that away. So that's fine. If it's the same thing, so while it's off, you won't see it. When you activate red eye, you'll get that little circle again. And if you click it, it becomes active. I've got a few adjustments there as to what size the pupil is. So if I bring that right down, the red comes back. If I extend that out, it's taking even more of it away. Oops, wrong one. And same with if I want to darken that section or not. Okay, I wouldn't really recommend playing about with this too much because you're going to end up making an eye look absolutely awful. So nice and simple. Go to the center of the red section, click it, let it do its thing, and there we go. That will do not too bad. Best way to avoid red eye is it's caused by a flash that's going off directly into the eye. So anything that you're using softer light in, if you're using a flash from an angle, anything like that at all, that's all going to help that. Red eye is not quite so much a thing anymore, I don't think. It's not something you see too often. Okay, let's do another couple. So I'm going to bring into one of your flower shots here. Now you've got these next two. You've got a rectangle and you've got a circle. These are your graduated filter and your radial filter. Very, very similar. One's lines, one circles. Okay, so let's pick one. go with the radial. Let's bring that back to fit normal size. So in the normal gradiated filter, what this basically does is, if you've ever used a gradient, whether it be in design or images or anything at all, is it's an adjusted, not adjusted, sorry, a softening adjustment. So I have this little plus on my screen. I'm going to click it, let's just say at the top. I'm going to continue to hold it and I'm going to drag this down. Okay, and you can see these lines appearing. And this is my selection here. What this does is highlights off this box. Okay, so these are the options that I have available to me now. And if I say I want to change the exposure in a gradiated way, so if I, let's say, darken it down. Because it's gradiated, it is darker at the top, and it still becomes darker throughout that selection, but it's darker at one side than it is at the other. So by the time I'm getting to the bottom, there's no real difference anymore. Okay, and I can move that around and think, actually, I want that to start coming in from about here. And I can make that kind of adjustment. I can change the lines. I can move this around. And if I don't like it, I can just take it out. Do the same thing with the radial. Same thing, just with the circle. Excuse me. So again, if I want to, let's say, highlight just this one little seed that's standing out. So a vignette will only work on the edges, remember? Whereas if I want to focus on this little section here, for example, I'm going to click. I'm going to get a circle. And once that's there, I'm just going to move it into the place that I want. Let's say here. And what I can do with this is then darken down everything around. So the section that is circled off isn't really being affected. Also, again, not going to do it quite that strong. Excuse me. And I've got all these different adjustments that I can play with. So if I want everything around it to be warmer, I can do that, or vice versa. I can make that colder, make that stand out a bit more. I can adjust the contrast. I can soften it down, make that stand out even more. If I bring that contrast really down, everything is a lot softer around it, which then makes this stand out even more. Let's go back into that. So, for example, darken it, soften it. That makes that individual seed stand out a lot more, really pops out of the image now. Okay. It can be a bit complicated again, just getting started. And the more you play with it, the more you get used to it. So again, if I come back to this gradiated one, as I pull that down, I can make it come diagonal. I can just move this around. All I'm doing is moving the mouse around as to try and get the balance and the angle that I want it to come in at. So if I want to do it that way, I would increase, say, the temperature. So I'm really warming up this corner, but it's not just a flat block that's getting adjusted. It's strongest in the corner. It's softening down as it comes in. And then you've got this, everything else is smoothed out, everything else is darkened, and it's bringing more attention into this. Is that making sense, folks? I know this is quite a lot to cover off, and like I say, unfortunately, this is high level, but it should give you the indication as to what you might want to come back and look into in a bit more detail. Okay, and for the members, there will be the follow-up session, which will be the next social session as well, which is in 2 weeks.
But it's definitely made me want to. I'm very interested in getting Lightroom. Okay. That's for sure. Because I've gone from like taking lots and lots of photos to really literally just like focusing on one.
Yeah.
And this is what I want to do. I want to kind of get, yeah.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. And then, all right, we're getting to the point of about 2 hours. Let's say 2 to 2.5 hours, so that's fine. Right, so let's just reset that one back to normal. Now let's pick a different one. So finally, let's go into yours here. In fact, actually, I'll come back to this because I'm going to use this specific example here. So again, this one's a stock image. And this is the brush adjustment. So whereas these ones like the red eye, the cropping, these are focused on specific areas, okay, and even the radial adjustments and so on. This one here is the brush. This is the adjustment brush, and this is for making very specific, very local adjustments. So again, I'm just going to click into this. I'll take a second, and again, my bar will change. And this is where I can just brush in exactly where I want to make some changes. Okay, so to demonstrate, there's a list of preset options in here. So for example, if I'm doing portraits, I have a teeth whitening option, for example. And you can see what it does. It increases the exposure and it lowers the saturation. Okay, so it's making them a bit brighter and it's dropping the amount of color that's there. And as I click and hold, and I'm just basically going to paint it with the mouse, and I'm just going to go around the teeth like that. And you can see the difference that's making there. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So really quick, really simple. I can then go, so let's say soften skin. So if I click this one, now, rookie mistake, I've left that highlighted. I've left that one active. So when I've changed the setting, it has applied that instead. So I need to hit return so that I've confirmed that change. And then when I can go back here and I can go back into soften skin. So there's nothing active now, so it's okay. And if I start brushing, say, let's say under the eyelids and around here, let's that patch here and just around here. Okay. I can basically do this just anywhere I think it's needed. And all this is basically doing is softening out some of the specifics. Just going to do this really quickly around there. Okay, because what this is doing is reducing the clarity massively. So remember we went over the clarity. If I bring this up to the other side just to demonstrate, it's horrendous. Okay. Adding clarity on faces really defines the lines and any little imperfections, so it's something you tend to avoid. But similarly, if you bring it down, it softens things up quite a bit. And again, even to be honest, if you're at 100, minus 100 on the clarity, it can be too much. It can take too much of the detail away from the skin and it just looks adjusted, looks edited. Okay, so I could just go around, all the way around, let's just basically paint our whole face, essentially our lips, everything like that. Okay, I can do all that. There we go. And if I just reset the image, just to see how much difference that's made on our skin. So all those little lines here and here were all disappeared. Okay, I'll change that back. There we go.
Wow.
So that's what it's doing. I'm painting specifically where I want. Okay, and let's just do one more really quickly. Iris Enhance, which is a fun one. I don't think it's going to work very well for this particular lady. And again, I've left that point active, so it's changed to enhance the iris of our skin instead of soften it all down. So Iris Enhance, so what this is doing is increasing the exposure, so it's making it a bit brighter. It's adding a little bit of clarity, so it's defining a bit more, and it's upping the saturation, so it's putting in more color. And what I would do with this one is zoom in closer. When I'm zoomed in as well, guys, remember I can click around on this navigator window, but I can't click because I've got the brush active. So what I can do is hold the space bar and it changes to a hand, and I can then drag it around. Okay, so I'll get both the eyes in the shot. And with this brush, I'm just going to paint around the iris. I don't think it's going to work very well in this one just because of the color of our eyes isn't very strong. Let's just, again, for demonstration, that's the difference it would be making. Okay, it would bring the eyes brighter, define them a little bit more, and put a bit more color in them. So if you've got like strong blue eyes, green eyes, that kind of thing, it's just going to enhance that color and define the actual pattern within the eye itself as well. So that can be really helpful when you're doing portraits as well. Just to make them pop a little bit. Works really well for kids' photos, especially if you've got like little babies, their eyes are like super blue. You can just bring them out like even a little bit more. Okay, can work really well. And those are very, very specific things. Okay, so let's just reset all that and come back to the normal zoom. So yeah, those are very specific presets. Okay, so for example, if I just want to make certain areas brighter, so I'll go to exposure. Now I've set this to 2 stops brighter. And the only reason I've done that is so that I can see where I'm painting. So as soon as I start painting in, I can see exactly what's happening with this. Okay. Now, I'm not going to use this image. I'm going to show you a good way of making the most of this. So I'm just going to flick back to my library. I'm going to come to my quick collection because these are some ones that I picked earlier. And if I come into this image here and come to develop, okay, so what I have here is the model is in a relatively darkened part of the scene here, really bright behind her, so that's standing out. It's drawn all the attention away. It's not what I want it to do. So if I'm just doing a full edit on this one, okay, as a run through, what I want to do is get my brush. In fact, actually, no, don't. What I would do first off is do what I can globally. So if I could bring the highlights down, for example, that darkens down those sections, but it also darkens down a lot of her as well. So it's not really ideal. So I'm going to grab my brush and I'm going to keep it on exposure. I'm going to start painting in these sections here. Okay, now it doesn't make a difference if this is set to an extra 2 stops of exposure just now, because as long as it's painted, I can change this any way I want. As long as it's active, I can bring that section down. I say, right, I want to bring that right down to there. While it's still active, I can then paint a second section. Okay, I can see what's doing there. Now I'm just doing this really quickly because what happens is I've got this option down here called auto mask. If I take this off, the circle there that I'm painting, everything in that circle is going to be included as part of this. So if I go over her arm, for example, that's going to get included. It's going to start taking in the wall. And if I hover over the pin, don't click, just hover over it, it will red up the sections that have been painted. Okay, so I can see what sections are affected and which ones aren't. As you can see, that is a really bad selection because it's gone over her arm, the sides of the wall, everything. So let's just undo that part. But if I use this auto mask, what this is basically doing is looking at the scene and deciding anything that matches as close as possible. So if I carry on through this, any green bits are going to get picked up here, any black bits there. Okay, that section, grey section is going there. Now I'm going over her arm, her arm's in the circle. It is not being affected because they are 2 completely different colours. And it's always picking it up from where that little plus sign is in the middle. Okay. So if I now hover over that, you can see it's completely ignored her arm across that section. And it's also not gone into the stonework around her as well. So that auto mask is massively helpful. If I do accidentally go across them all, it can just undo as normal. But what I can also do is hold in Alt on the keyboard, and you see that plus has now changed to a minus. So what I'm now doing is taking that painted section away. Now, a little tip on this one again, guys, is, for example, there's no auto mask just now while I'm on the plus. When it changes to the minus, if I don't want that auto mask, I need to set that as well because the auto mask is now on. Okay. So keep the auto mask on for this, and I would just carefully paint across her arm like that, because I don't want any of these sections behind her adjusted. And if I let go of that, it goes back to the plus. If I check hovering over here again, I can see that red section is no longer on her arm, which means it's not impacted. There are a few parts on the stonework around where her arm is. So we just do the same thing, Alt. I would get a smaller circle just by scrolling. or sliding down here. Okay, size, feather are down there. So I'll make that a smaller circle and just paint around there. Again, because I've got such a difference on the effect, I'm like taking four stops down, 5 stops down, 6, whatever. I can see the difference instantly as soon as I click into those sections. Okay, so look at that and think, right, I'm happy enough with that. Okay, I would also do it a little bit more detail, but I just say I'm fine with that. So then hit enter, happy with that. I've still got my brush selected, it's still on exposure. It's gone back to its default, or the default I've set it as +2. What I do here is I want to keep the stonework dark, but I want her to be brighter. So I'm going to pop the auto mask on, so it's only picking up the right sections, and I'm just going to paint across her. So even just there, actually, so I'll do that one again. If I zoom in a little bit on this one here, right there. Because the plus sign is across her skin, this won't spill over into her hair if I don't want it to, because her hair is such a different color from her skin. Because of that masking, it's not going to pick up. It's not going to pick up her lips unless I put the plus sign over her lips. And again, same with the hair. If I put it over the hair as I'm painting, it will then start picking up. Okay. Does mean you got to make sure you get the eyes and the lips and things like that. Or I've got like one part of her goggles brighter than the other. So I need to make sure I come back and get both of those sides. And let's just zoom this back out. So we'll just super quickly, just demonstration, make it a bit smaller. Even with the auto mask, I do my best not to spill over the sides too much, because if the colors are fairly similar and we've got like the dark of our tights and the dark of the stonework are going to get picked up together. So it works great if the colors and contrast are totally different, but if they're similar, it will pick some of it up. Okay. So let's just go down our arm there. Again, just really quickly get the bits of our hair that I missed. Up this arm here. And then holding an Alt, undo the stonework around her that I've done by accident, just to take that away. I would also be much more careful doing this properly. This is just a really quick demonstration here. Just down there. I say, right, that's fine. And I've kept the exposure so high because I wanted to see what parts are being highlighted. I would now come back to this and say, what's realistic? I say, right, maybe about there, for argument's sake. And enter to come out with that one, enter to come out with the brush. And what I can do in this screen is if I press Y, I will see a before and after. And again, multiple ways to do things. You can choose that option down in the bar there as well. So I've gone from this, which is a fairly flat, fairly dark, really bright behind her, distracting, to this, where I've balanced out the background, I've kept the stonework dark, and I've brightened her up so she stands out of the shot more. Okay, that's a really, really quick run through. Really quick demonstration on that one, but that's the kind of edits and adjustments I would be doing with these tools.
So that's the technique you would use, like if you took a portrait and you, let's say it was sort of a sunny day, so you put someone in open shade, but so one side of their face was too dark, you could do this to even out the face.
For even out the face, I'll probably do it a little bit different. I'll just zoom into her face. We don't really have it here. I would tend to work on the shadows and the highlights. You could absolutely do that. It does get quite tricky to look on the face, because any adjustments are very, very noticeable, because that's obviously going to be the point that you're focusing on anyway.
Okay.
But if like half the face was in shade, for example, I would come to the shadows, lighten them up just a little.
Bring them up, okay.
And maybe even if the other side was quite bright, bring the highlights down a little and try and just balance those out a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
The technique I would use for that.
Okay.
Okay, another quick use case, if I come into this shot here. I think a couple of you might have seen this shot before. And I hate to do this, I'm sorry. Selective color or color splash, where everything's black and white apart from one color, for example. Again, tends to be a bit of a fad thing, but I'm going to demonstrate it just as to what you can do with these adjustments. So with this shot, if I was keeping it in color, I would adjust the exposure a little. I would up the contrast just to give it a little bit more pop. I'll maybe come down to the section down, not that one, sorry. Section down here under effects. And I'd maybe pop on a light vignette just to bring attention into the stack here, okay? And if I wanted to make it black and white, if I want to make it completely black and white, I would just click black and white, right? That's nice and simple. What I can do though is come into my color range, my HSL stroke color, depending on which way you want to do it. I'm going to go to my saturation, and the table's green, so I want that gone. So come to my greens and just take that away. Now the table's not picking up as green at all, so I'll use my little selector here. I think it's actually picking up as aqua. So it's the bluey type parts that are bringing in. So if I click and pull my mouse down the way, that is actually adjusting it more than the green. So by looking at it, I already said that was green. Turns out it wasn't. And let's say I want this orange chip to be the pattern keep-in. So the yellows, let's get rid of the yellows as well. Okay. There's a little bit of blue shining through, so I could get rid of them. Now the orange, which is the chip that I would want for argument's sake, again, if I adjust this, it's affecting these. I would look at these and think these were red, these numbers that are still showing. But because they're a reddy orangey type color, if I adjust the orange, it's going to take some of that out. If I only adjust the red, it's still going to leave some of the color in. So that's not really what I want it to do. So this is where I then come to the brush adjustment. And I would change this drop down to saturation. Now the default is increasing saturation, okay? So I would bring the saturation right down and take my brush and just say, I don't want any of this color showing, and just brush out saturation in all these sections here. There we go. And that's how I would do that. And if I wanted to, I could enhance the orange, make it pop a little bit more, bring the vignette down more, all this kind of stuff. So there's a bit more I could do with that, but again, just as a very quick demonstration, that's what I would do with that one. Okay, is this still making sense, guys? I know it is quite a lot. So the one downside of a crash course, I'm afraid, is that there's a lot of information thrown at you.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Good.
Right, I'll do one more, and then I'll come on to your images, and then we'll go to, in fact, actually, I'll do one more. I'll do the export, and then we are getting a little bit short on time, so I'll leave it up to yourselves if you want to stay on, and we'll go through a couple of your images as well. So I'll do this one here, and if you guys seen the black and white workshop, sorry, it's getting late, like I said, you'll know probably what I'm about to do here. So I look at it and think it's a fairly impactful shot, but I think it's going to work better in black and white. So I'm going to add black and white, one click. I've got this individual little stone sitting here, which I don't want. So I click to zoom in, get the image where I want it, come to my spot removal, make sure the circle is big enough to cover the part that I want, click it, see what it tries to do. Now, this can happen, okay? Not too bad when I zoom out, but let's just put this back in color just to see it a little easier. Because you're doing it as such a circular change, you're getting a little bit of a circular effect and a little bit of a lighting difference just there. So that's where you might want to come back to it. I think, right, my circle's maybe a bit too big. Let's just shrink it down. Don't quite need that. Or you're taking it all from a grey section, whereas the part I'm trying to cover is crossing between the grey and the purple. So what I'm going to do is try and find a part that matches crossing the grey and the purple. Let's just say like that. Like that. Does that work better? I'd probably say it does work a little bit better. You can play about with it until you got a part that you are quite happy with. Let's see if I actually want to maybe use this bit right here. No, that's adding too much of that. Yeah, I think I'll probably just leave it there, to be honest. I'm going to leave it on heel rather than clone because I don't want it to be exact. I want it to try and match it up. Okay. Again, it'd take, oh, actually, there's a better one. Look. I was going to say, again, it'd take a little bit more time just to play about with it, but I'm not going to do that just now. So what I'd probably do there is just have a little look around and say, right, there's maybe a section, say down here, where we're going grey into the pinker brick, which might work a bit better. Okay, so I'll play about and try and get as close a match as possible. But again, don't get so fixated because you're so zoomed in. If I'm zoomed out, it's never going to stand out. If I didn't know that was a thing, I would just think that's the way that brick was. Like that part of cement came off, it's fine. In black and white, can't even notice it so much. The sign is now super bright, so I'm going to bring the highlights of that down. Just everything. Okay, making it a bit more dramatic. Even in black and white, because it was shot in raw, I can still change the colors. So again, really, really quickly, in the color section, this green writing, because it's not a very strong color, it doesn't show up very well in black and white. So what I would do is come to my greens under the black and white section. This only appears in black and white, okay? Bring my greens down to make them darker. So I can see that a lot clearer. Okay, so that's where it is. I can make them almost disappear, just make them brighter or make them darker. So it's the tones that are standing out more now. So I'll do that. And I would then come to my radial filter because I think a vignette could work just to bring in the edges a little bit. Let's just demonstrate that. Come down to, again, effects. Come to this post-crop vignetting. Click on there, put it slightly to the left and think, that works not bad, but it's kind of really centralizing everything. I don't necessarily want it to do quite that. So I'll come up here, come into my circular adjustments. Let's see. I wanted this whole side to be okay and just the right side to change. It's not saturation, so let's change that and change to exposure. Definitely don't want it that bright. I would bring that down and maybe do it that way. So a much more concentrated darkness on the one side and kept where she's lying brighter and the sign still quite bright as well. Again, if I just click on the before and after. Oh, no, it's not before and after, sorry, that's reference. Before and after, it's picking up black and white anyway, because it was black and white to start with when I brought it over. Okay, so let's just say if I reset it then. So it's gone from that, I brought it to that. That's because I know what I'm doing and because I know what I want that edit to be. So I was able to do that in about 20 seconds or so. So I think somebody's going to ask something there.
Yeah, so when you had the oval and then you made it darker on the right-hand side, well, her left, our right.
Yeah.
I would have thought when you were bringing the exposure down that it would have been within the oval, but it was on the outside of the oval.
It's on the outside of the oval now. That is a good point, because what you can also do with these adjustments is you have an invert option.
Oh.
So I can then say, that's it now. The adjustment is now inside the circle.
You brought it down inside, but you did invert, so it brought it down outside.
Yeah. So
okay.
I can look at either way I prefer. So if the invert's off, it will do the outside of the circle. If
okay.
I pick to invert it, it will do the inside of the circle.
Okay.
Okay, good point. Well made, thank you. Okay, right. So let's say for argument's sake, I've now run through all my images. Let's come back to the ones I've imported, and let's. I think I've done these enough. So if I brought this one up here, and again, if I just super quickly say, right, the sky's too bright, so let's bring down the highlights because that's going to bring out the lighter section. Let's add a bit of contrast just to help make it pop a little bit more. And we would add a touch of clarity just because I like them. I would zoom into those posts and take these away. We've already done it on these ones, so you know what that looks like. I'll just do that really quickly. And again, it's on heal rather than clone, so it's going to try and match it as best it can. And again, that's done a really good job on that one. You'd never know that was anything there. We also do it with the other one, but we'll skip that just now. If I wanted, I would think that I don't like the look of the grass just because of how yellowing it is. So I would probably come down to my hue, come to my yellow and bring it slightly to the greener side. Okay, so I've taken it from a field that's a bit dry and a bit yellowy. I'll bring this up a little bit and make it look a bit more lush, a bit more green, without going overboard on it. I'll probably do a little bit of detail. There's a little bit of sharpening. As I normally do that with most, just a little bit. Most of the time, to be honest, most of the time with the sharpening, I do it out of habit because when I'm looking at that shot, I can't really see the difference. So I just do it because it's habit. And I say, right, okay, happy with that. So when we have done all of our adjustments, okay, we're happy with the results that we've got, it's then time to export. So again, we are not adjusting the image, the original image file in any way, shape or form. That remains completely safe and intact. So I've edited this cover version, this mask, if you like, of the image. So I come down to where import was, I'm going to click export. I'll only do the one. I'll say as many as you highlight, let's just cancel that a sec. Let's just do a couple. Any that are selected will be included in the export. Okay. And again, I still do this from time to time. I'll have those 8 images in front of me and think, great, I'm going to export these 8 photos. But I've only clicked one and I only get one because that's all it exports. So if I just said I'm going to do this one, and this one. And come to export. Now, my Lightroom is starting to run a little bit slow. Lightroom is a resource-hungry monster, and the longer it runs, the more it will start to slow down. So if it needs to be, if you find that's happening, close it down, give it a minute, restart it, and it'll be fine. It just clears it out, okay? Right, so this is the export screen. And in this point, you have the export to CD and DVD. I mean, to be honest, I don't even know most computers that have CDs and DVD drives anymore. So pretty much always going to be to hard drive. There is some presets built in here. Again, these are so outdated, I wouldn't even use them. I've just set my own. So the way you do that is, even if you use a preset or not, to be honest, export to. These are going to be options. So do you want a specific folder? Do you want it straight to the desktop? Do you want the My Pictures folder, which is just default ones? Do you want it in the same folder as the original photo is to keep them together? Whatever you decide to do. So I've got a specific folder. So I would click choose and I'll get my normal browsing window popping up. I'm just going to say, right, what folder do I want it to go into? So I'll just click to where I want it to be. So into my VPC folder and into Edit Crash Course. In this example, folder 3 is going to be my export. So folder 1 was the pretend camera stroke memory card, wherever the originals were. Folder 2 has copied them across, and that's where the originals on the computer are. So for, again, argument's sake, folder 1's the camera. I format that memory card, they're gone, so they're now on this computer. Folder 3 is going to be where I export them to. Again, I've got the option to make a subfolder if one doesn't already exist. If you're using separate catalogs, which we're not, ignore that. Lightroom basically works on a catalog basis. All the all the files, all the images that exist in this setting that you're looking at just now, the 26,000 images that I have in Lightroom just now, this is one catalog of images, okay? If you want to get into it, you can make multiple catalogs. I don't really recommend it. Once upon a time, like many, many years ago, when Lightroom got to 10 or 15,000 images, the catalog started really slowing down because there were so many images to process through. Doesn't really happen anymore. As I say, I've got 26,000 there. It's not an issue. I know other people that have 50 or 100,000, not an issue. Doesn't really slow in the same sort of way, just because of the way the tech works. I know some people that have had a separate catalog for personal photos, a separate catalog for business photos, which that one kind of makes sense. That's fine. But you can only open one catalog at a time. So if you're in the wrong one, you open up Lightroom, it'll always come back to the default one that you had open last. So if you're on your work one and you open up Lightroom, it's going to default straight back to your work one, and you need to change it into your personal one. And it does get a bit clunky. So it's easier. There are easier ways of sorting them, which I'll come to in just a second. So don't want to add it to a separate catalog. Okay, so that's fine. If the file already exists, it's just saying ask what to do. And that just means it will pop up with an error saying the file name you've picked already exists. What do you want to do? Do you want to skip it, write over it, so on? Normal Windows, Mac operating stuff. You've got the option to rename it, very similar to when we named them when we imported them. The custom name, 1 of 10, 2 of 10, so on, the sequence, whatever you want to do. You can keep that as original. Now, bear in mind, you might have imported 100, but you're maybe only keeping 30 of them. So if you export them, sorry, it's the same name, you'll have file 1, file 7, file 42, file 43, and file 53. So they won't necessarily run in sequence unless you rename the ones that you're keeping. In this case, that's what I would do. So I say VPC test, and it'll just name them 1, 2, and 3. There's an option for video, which we won't go into just now. File settings. There's really no reason not to have the quality at 100 unless you are really trying to save on disk space, but you want the images to be as good as they can be, so quality of 100. Color space, leave that as default. Okay, that's tech stuff. And you can limit the file size. Again, we wouldn't do that because that's going to reduce the quality. Okay. You can bring them out in Photoshop files in the DNG, which is that generic raw format. Keep the original or JPEG. And normally when you export, it's going to be JPEG because that's what you need to put them onto your social media, the website, and so on. Put them in JPEG. Let's carry on down. Image sizing. Now, this can be a good one. If you don't tick resize to fit, you'll just get the full size image. Okay. If, however, again, this is for your social media, website, and so on, you don't want the big full-size images. They take up more disk space. They are slower to load, particularly on websites and things. So you can change the sizing. Normally, I would leave this on long edge because that means it doesn't make a difference whether they are portrait or landscape orientation. It will always resize them the correct way. You can set it to a percentage. You can set it to a set width and height. You can set to set dimensions. But if you've cropped it the way you want it, none of these don't really apply. So just leave it set to long edge. Set the pixel. The reason I have 2048 is because that I mostly post to Facebook, and that is one of the recommended dimensions of Facebook. I think it's 2048, 720, and I think there's maybe 1024. But they're quite small files, so if somebody tries to open it up, it's not going to look great. I'll say if you're going to be printing, I probably recommend just leaving the full size. Okay, because what your pixel count, what you're doing is you're essentially cutting the physical size of the image that you're now saving out, which is a difficult concept, thinking of a physical image size on a digital file. But if you are going from, so if I left that on full size, it's about 6,000 pixels. If I'm cutting it down, I'm basically chopping away 2/3 of it. But I've cropped it. It's not going to impact how, it's not going to cut off the edges or anything. It's the image that I've cropped. So what you're seeing in the preview there, that's going to be the full image I get, regardless of how I size it. You then also got the resolution, and 300 is the default if you're going to be printing. Pretty much all print companies will look for a 300 pixels per inch, or PPI. What you'll quite often see is a recommendation for web use of 72. Again, that's quite an old one. Doesn't actually make a difference. If it's a digital file, the pixels per inch makes no difference at all. So I will always export at just 2 pixels per inch. Doesn't impact the digital side in any way, shape, or form. That is how I post it into Facebook. That's how I post into groups, Instagram, anything at all. It makes no difference. You wouldn't see a difference between 300 and 2 when it's digital. And it also doesn't affect the file size. Doesn't make any difference. It does mean that if somebody tries to print it, it's going to look pretty awful. So there's a little bit of security in that side of it as well. Output sharpening. Again, these are defaults to sharpening for certain papers, for certain screens, and so on. You should have done all the sharpening, all the editing in your Develop tab. So we'll leave that unchecked. Metadata, again, do you want to keep the metadata in there, or do you want to remove it? If you put it in the first place, you'd be as well removing it. You'd be as well keeping it in. And that way, again, like I mentioned earlier, if somebody tries to steal any digital files, the metadata is still embedded. It's not completely foolproof. There are ways to strip that information out if somebody is so minded to try and steal your images on purpose. But it's there and it can be handy. You can watermark directly in Lightroom, and the default will have a very simple C for copyright. And again, you can go into this and you can pick whichever one you want. So if you don't have one, you click into edit. Obviously, that looks ridiculous. I'd never put that on an image. That's huge. However, what I would do is either, if you've got a logo, pick it as a graphic, and that's either going to be a PNG file or a JPEG, probably PNG, but it's fine. So you just pick whichever image you wanted, or keep it as text. And just for quickness, we'll keep this as text. Again, you choose your image from there. So your text options. You can change your font, the style, center, align, all this kind of stuff. You can change the color of it. A little bit too far. All the kind of normal stuff you'd expect to see. Okay, your opacity of the text, you can change that shadow, the opacity of the shadow. If you don't want any shadow at all, if you want it quite pronounced to really pop out. And with most things on a watermark, you want it to be fairly subtle. It still needs to be there, still needs to indicate that this is your image, but you don't want something like this. It's like massive, bold, and destroying the image. Okay. So basically just go around these settings until you're happy with the final output, and you just move it around as you see fit. You can set it based on an anchored point around the image there. And then you'd change the text in here, whatever you wanted it to be. Once you're happy with it, click save, and that will create that as a watermark that you can use again and again. And as you'll see there, I've got a few already set in. Not going to do it for this one. And again, post-processing. So after export, you can pop up a folder that you've exported to. You can open that file then in Photoshop. You can do a few different things. Just do nothing, because at this point, you're probably done with the image. You've done what you're done what you're going to do with it, and you're happy with it. Then just click export. And again, depending on how many files you are doing and the size of the files that you're saving out, if you're doing full size, they will take longer. If you're doing cut down to the 2048, for example, you get this little status bar up here. It shows you how long it's taken. And that's it done. So in folder 3, those photos now exist. So they have taken the raw file, which can't be used for anything other than editing. I have done all the adjustments that I want to do in them. I've renamed them if I've decided to do that. I've then saved them out as usable JPEGs, and I can now go and fire that onto Facebook, social, Instagram, anything you want to do with them. Okay. That is pretty much the full edit flow, guys. a couple of quick points is if you look down this left menu here, what you will see is a few of these question marks and a few grayed out folders. Because Lightroom is an organizing tool, any organizing you do has to be done in Lightroom or you can lose the photos. Okay, so for demonstration again, let's just shrink up some of these. Okay, so folder 2, this is where I imported these files to. Okay, if, for example, I went to my Windows or Mac and I decided, actually, these flower photos, they shouldn't be there. So I'm going to cut them out here. And I'm going to put them into folder 4 because that's where they belong, because they're flowers, they're not part of the field, they shouldn't be there. What's going to happen is you're going to get this little error message on these photos now. Okay, so it's saying photo is missing. So remember, we're not adjusting the original images, we're only adjusting this cover. Because you've moved the photos in the background outside of Lightroom, Lightroom now does not know where those photos are. Doesn't know where they are at all. Okay. So you can either just put those photos back, which is nice and easy, or you can click on that icon to tell me it's missing, and I get the option to locate the file. So I can locate it. And so let's say things are running a little bit slow now. And I know I moved them into folder 4. So now this is where Lightroom gets really tricky, because that folder doesn't exist because Lightroom doesn't recognize it. It's not as clever as Windows or Mac. It doesn't know that the folders are there because Lightroom's never used it. So in that kind of example, the easiest thing to do is just pop them back. Just go, you know what, let's put them back here, like so. And when I come back to Lightroom, give it a little second or two, and that error will just disappear. Don't need to refresh, don't need to click anything, don't need to do anything like that at all. It just knows that that's where they've gone. Okay. What I basically do need to do is, if I right click where I want it to, and I'm going to create a folder inside here, and call it folder 4. Create this. So that folder now exists within Lightroom. Okay, it's empty just now. And what I can then do is take these 2 images, and we're going to click and drag over folder 4. And it's going to say, you're about to move these items. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Yes, move them. And there we go. So that is now it moved correctly. So those 2 images now exist in folder 4. And if I come, assuming this has worked the way it's supposed to, they now exist in folder 4. So if you're moving files, folders, anything at all, if you're renaming anything at all, if you're using Lightroom, you have to do it in Lightroom. Otherwise, they get lost. Okay. Same thing with folders. If you have a whole folder where this question mark is appearing, again, if I right click on it, I have the option to find the missing folder. And again, that's just going to bring up my Explorer window, and I just navigate to where that folder exists, wherever it happened to be. Say it's in my VPC folder, for example. I click that and hit select folder. As long as that matches up and the images are there, it will balance itself back out again. Okay. One last little thing on the organizing is collections. So I'm in my library tab. Let's just come back to folder 2 where most of the images are. If I scroll down here, so I've got both my drives and all the folders it knows and so on. Let's just minimize these out the way just now, because I have collections. Now it does have some instant smart collections, okay, some default ones. So anything that's been rated 5 stars, for example, anything that's been added in the past month, any video files, ones that don't have any keywords. So that's a good way to, if you haven't added keywords, they're not going to be searchable using the way I showed you earlier. that's a good way to click that and just add keywords into them. Okay, so if you want to do that. This is almost like a folder structure, okay? So if, for example, I want to add a new collection, just click that little plus, create a collection, and say this one is going to be trees. And I want to create that. And it's taken that image that was already highlighted into this collection. Okay. I thought, oh, I've missed the other two, so I need to come back, select them, again, just click, drag down to the collection into trees, and that's them in there. Now, collection, again, this gets a little complicated. It doesn't move the actual files, okay, or even these cover versions that are in Lightroom. They still exist in folder 2. A collection is a version of it. It's a link, a shortcut to where the image is. Okay, so it knows that they're in folder 2. You've just grouped them together. Personally, I don't use them very much because I have my folders set up in such a way. All my weddings are in one folder, all my award events are in one folder, all my portraits are in one folder, and so on. So I don't tend to use collections very often, if at all. And the very, very last thing I'm going to do is, if you want to create multiple versions of an image, you can create what is called a virtual copy. And I can do that through this right click on the image and click it. That's going to be, I'm just going to leave it with that actually. So it's a virtual copy and I can make any adjustments to that at all. So let's just say really, really quick, develop. If I wanted that one to be a black and white version. So instead of making all the edits on just one, and then not really being sure which one I want to use, or if I want to have a color and a black and white version, I can do it like that. And as far as Lightroom is concerned, that is just an image available. I can export directly from that. It doesn't copy the original, still doesn't affect the original at all. That's just the way it works. Okay, folks, I have probably rambled a fair little bit towards the end there. Okay. But that is all of the crash course done.
That was a lot.
I'm sorry if it is too much. I've tried to cover as much as I can in a fairly short time. I know we've gone a bit over time, so my apologies for that. But I want to give you as much information as I can to make sure we're covering off all the points that make you think either, right, I'm going to go and play around with Lightroom now, or at least, okay, I don't know everything. I know I wouldn't after like a couple of hours, but I know a good amount now on the basics, or I know what I want to go and look at to learn more about. I want to play more with that radial filter. I want to play more with the vignetting, for example.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot, like a lot.
Good.
So this was good.
I'm glad to hear it.
Is
Yeah.
Lightroom, is it something you can download? Is it free or do you have to pay for it?
You do have to pay for it. So Lightroom itself is a subscription version. Once upon a time, you could buy it as a standalone. A lot of photographers don't like it as a subscription version because it's a recurring payment, you never own it, etc. But it does mean you get all the updates. So rather than buying a version and that's all you have, you are subscribing to the use of Lightroom. So anytime it updates, anytime new features come along, you have access to all those used to update Lightroom and it comes in. What it does mean is you are pretty much tied into them because all of your edits exist within Lightroom. So if you ever decide to stop using Lightroom, you basically have to export everything with all of your edits because you can't just come in and make another tweak on it.
Ooh.
So there's pros and cons. Some people like it, some people don't. I mean, personally, I've been using Lightroom or Adobe in general for my entire photography journey. So 7 years-ish, maybe more than that now. So yeah, I'm quite happy using it. I've got 26,000 photos in Lightroom. Never had an issue. It's £10 a month. That doesn't strike me personally as a lot for the amount that you can do because that gets you Lightroom and full version Photoshop as well.
Yeah.
There's a bundle package. You can get Lightroom on its own with more cloud storage, which I don't use anyway. So it makes much more sense to get the two stronger packages together. Any hobby or business, if you go down that route, there's going to be costs involved, whether it's website hosting or if it's model shipbuilding, you've got to buy the ships and the parts and the glue and whatever all else. There is always a cost involved in a hobby. So a tenner a month is not a lot in my personal view. There are other options, like was mentioned earlier, Snapseed is a very, very popular one. But there are plenty that you can look at that do these kind of basic adjustments as well. And they all work.
As far as, I mean,
really
I've only used ones on my phone so far. So yeah, I want to move up. I want to use one on my computer, on my PC. So Lightroom is the one.
I think you can get Snapseed on a desktop now. I didn't think you could originally look for it, and I found it and I was surprised, and I just didn't have time to go exploring it at the time, but I think you can get it. So have a Google.
Yeah, I kind of got to the
desktop.
point with it. I did manage to, it's on my computer, but I haven't, don't know, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like I said, I started with Lightroom, so I've never really strayed from it. I've never looked into anything else. I know it, I'm comfortable with it, and I'm quite happy with what it delivers. So
I think you can get Lightroom as a mobile.
Mm-hmm.
You can use it mobily as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep, absolutely.
I wouldn't. My eyes are too bad, but
Me too. And edit a 5-inch screen is just ridiculous.
yeah.
People do it. So I prefer the classic. I'm old fashioned. I like a desktop. I like to sit at a computer and edit, big screen, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The other version I showed you earlier was the cloud version, which has a lot of the same functionality, but it's a different layout. So again, super, super quick. You've still got things like your exposure versions, your contrast, your white balance, and so on. And these are cloud-based. So the photos essentially exist within Adobe Cloud. So it doesn't matter if you're using this version on a desktop or if you're using your mobile, they're all synced up. So you can kind of use them all that way. But like I say, I've just always learned on the desktop, the classic version, and I like it. So I use it.
But you know, so I'm only familiar with Snapseed and Photoshop. Did I miss something in there before you went through all the different choices, saturation, this, that, and that? Are there like automatic ones you could choose, you could select from? Or do you do it all manually? Do you do it all?
So there is the automatic option. So,
No, I sort of missed that.
No, that's okay. Like I said, there was a lot. So I'll just come back into develop.
So it has some like.
Sorry?
Does it have ones like, I don't know, like on Snapseed you got like pop or
presets? Yes, sorry, I've not done presets.
Yeah, presets. That's what they're called.
So very quickly, right?
Because sometimes I start off with presets to get an idea, to warm up as to what I.
Yeah, exactly. So presets are on the left in the develop tab. Okay, sorry, I didn't cover this bit. And there are a whole bunch of them. So these are the same ones that you can, well, you can do some of them on the import. Okay, personally, again, I prefer to use it under the develop side. You can scroll through and you can see which ones work. So you've got bright, high contrast, vivid, and it basically lets you see what it looks like. Okay, I'll just go through a few of these. So as I scroll through, I'm going to say, oh, I like that one, or no, that's awful, no, I don't like that. And I'll let you see what it's going to look like. So let's say if I pick, for example, warm contrast, if I click into that, you'll see on the side here the difference it's making. So it's taken down the blacks of the really deep shadows, it's taken them down. Or if I went for a red lift matte, it's up the whites, it's down the blacks, it's dropped the vibrance and the saturation. So I can see the adjustments that it's made when I click into it. So personally, I like to know what it is that it's doing. If I'm going to use a preset, I like to understand it rather than just click it and go, oh, that's fine. But yeah, you can absolutely either just go, oh, click, I'm happy with that, I don't need to do anything with it. Or you can use it as a starting point, as you say, click it and think, oh, I like that, but it's maybe still a bit too bright in the sky, so I'll just bring the highlights down on that as well. Okay, or something along those kind of lines. Similarly, you can save your own. So if you get all your adjustments in the way that you like, and you can click the plus, and you have create preset, and you get this kind of option here, okay? And all this is doing is like all these different adjustments. It's just asking, do you want to save them all as part of this preset or not? So do you want all your exposure, contrast, and highlights? Do you want all your tone curve adjustments, all your clarity, all your dehazing, everything like that? So if you thought, well, actually, I want all of it apart from the shadows and the highlights, just untick those. Okay, so you just save the bits that you wanted to save into it. And again, check all, check none, give it a name, put it into user presets. You can make separate groups for that if you like, and hit create. And you build your own preset way. So if you think, I like aged photo, but I like aged photo with a little bit more contrast in it. It could be something that simple.
If you have two very similar photos that you can't decide between, and you want the same result, say you work on one of them, you decided all your settings, can you literally transfer all those settings onto the other? Yeah.
So 2 ways you can do that. You can do exactly what I've just gone through and save it as a preset.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And then in which case, when you went into, say, this one here, this one here, and you went back into develop, you would have that saved. Sorry, system, Lightroom's starting to go quite slow now. You would have that saved under your user presets. So you would have that saved as one that you have just created yourself. Okay. The other option is in the library module. If you make sure you have the one that you've just changed is selected, and then holding either Control and select in all the individual ones, or Shift just to take a full line. So Shift will basically do the start to finish, whatever ones you click. Okay. So let's just keep it simple. So that's the main one that I've edited. Holding in Control and selecting this one. You then get down at the bottom corner here, sync settings. So click that. Again, that same kind of options. Do you want to basically sync everything? And normally you will have all the global stuff, exposure, contrast, lens correction, all that kind of stuff. But you don't necessarily want to carry over your local adjustments. So if you fixed a branch in one of the images, which isn't there in the next one, you're still, if you carry over the local adjustment, you're going to carry over any adjustment you made in that one section. If that branch doesn't exist, you're going to make an absolute mess of whatever happens to exist in that section of the next one. So I tend not to carry over the local stuff. And then just click synchronize. And then you'll see that popping up the same way. So all those adjustments that you've put into the first one will apply into whatever other ones you've highlighted and synced up. And that can be 1, it can be 50. Depends on how you want to do it.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? I know it is a lot, so obviously if you don't have any questions just now, that's absolutely fine. If you think of something, just give me a ping, okay?
I don't, because I don't know what time it is with everyone else, but it's half past 11. Well, I know it is for you, Andy, but
yes, absolutely.
I don't know where is everyone else?
I'm UK.
Yeah.
I'm
in
Florida.
the US, in Iowa.
Okay, so it's obviously daytime. It looks nice and light.
Yeah.
It's half past 11 here.
Well, it's
just
only
5:30
6:30 here. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about 2.5 hours, but we've gone about 3. So my apologies for running over a little bit there.
No worries.
Does anybody want to see any other adjustments, any other edits at all? Just while you're here, you can hang back a little bit if you like. You can drop off. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, I'm going to drop off. I'm sure I'll come up with some questions. You know me. So it
I'm
was
sure
nice
I'll
to
have
meet you
some.
guys.
You too.
Yeah.
Okay, no
See you.
problem. I will see you another time. But again, any questions, give me a shout. Okay.
I'm
Okay,
all done.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. I don't know how.